Hi, I'm Tamara, and what you're about to hear isn't just about a launch party gone wrong. My parents took the company I built, my dream, and handed it to my brother like it was his birthright. They rewrote the guest list. They cut my name from the press. And the worst part? They smiled, like it was nothing. I stood backstage, watching him take credit for everything I created. But what really broke me? It wasn't the applause he got. It was realizing they never planned for me to shine. So I took the mic, and I told the truth. But what happened after? That, you'll have to see for yourself. I was halfway through my second coffee when I saw the article. It had landed in my inbox sometime before dawn, forwarded by an old college friend with the subject line, "Your company made TechSpark." For a brief second, my heart actually fluttered. TechSpark was big in Boulder. Getting featured meant people in the startup ecosystem were finally noticing me, noticing TechSense. I clicked the link. By the time the headline loaded, my hand had already turned cold around the coffee mug. Dillard family launches promising AI venture, led by Romy Dillard. I blinked, scanned the byline, read it again. Then I scrolled, paragraph after paragraph of polished praise. Charismatic. Visionary. A bold new voice in emotional AI. Not once did my name appear. Not as co-founder, not as developer, not as anything. It was like I didn't exist. I minimized the browser tab and pulled up the business registration I'd saved on my desktop. The name was still there. TechSense LLC, founded by Tamara Wozniak, with a sudden, quiet addition. Right beside mine, in equal font weight, Romy Dillard. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at it and whispered, "How long?" I called the Colorado Business Registry, played it cool. "Just verifying corporate structure updates," I said. The woman on the other end was kind, efficient. She told me the co-founder update had been submitted 3 weeks ago. Filed through my father's firm. No signature from me required. Of course not. Not when it was family. I let out a breath, long and slow. I was used to being rewritten, erased, replaced. It started in Iowa. Back when we lived in Des Moines, I was the older child, the quiet achiever, as my mom liked to call it when guests were around. But really, I was more like the invisible daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who gave up her room at age 11 when Romy needed space to express himself. I moved downstairs next to the laundry room. No one asked. They just swapped my things while I was at school. I still remember coming home and seeing my bed shoved up against the utility sink. "Sweetie," my mom said without looking up, "you're more adaptable. Don't make it a thing." And that became the family motto. Don't make it a thing. Romy was the star. He painted on walls, hummed loudly through dinner, made up plays, and forced us to watch. When I came home with a first-place science trophy, Dad barely glanced at it. But when Romy came home with a D+ in music class and a creative note from his teacher, they bought him a new keyboard. By high school, it was clear. He was the heart. I was the hands. It wasn't just favoritism. It was institutionalized. Our family photos always had Romy in the middle. I was either cropped at the edge or missing entirely. At school, more than once, people asked if I was Romy's cousin. My mom never corrected them. When I got into University of Colorado Boulder on a partial scholarship, I was ecstatic. But my dad? He just looked over his glasses and said, "We'll have to see how that fits in with Romy's summer program in LA." I took out loans, lived in a sublet with no central heat, ate oatmeal for dinner for 2 semesters straight, built a life one spreadsheet at a time, and yet, somehow, when I built something from the ground up, when TechSense went from a late-night coding hobby to a viable beta-stage platform, it wasn't my success anymore. It was a Dillard family venture. Of course it was. The call came 2 months ago, my dad. "Sweetheart, Romy's getting good traction on social. You should think about making him more visible. He's a great communicator. You focus on the logic, he handles the optics." I had paused, then said, "You want him to be the face of the company I built?" His response? "We're all in this together." No, we weren't. I had been alone when I filed the paperwork, alone when I begged for my first investor meeting, alone in every cafe pitch session I booked off Craigslist leads, alone when the first beta client ghosted me. And alone when I got the second one to say yes? Only 2 people ever believed in me from the start. My grandparents, Mira and Eldon. They didn't know tech, but they knew how to look you in the eye and say, "We trust your judgment." That counted for more than I realized back then. Now, sitting in my apartment in Boulder, fingers numb and a sour taste creeping up the back of my throat, I opened the link again. There it was. TechSense, the future of AI emotion, driven by Romy Dillard. A family name, a borrowed legacy, my work. The apartment buzzed with quiet, just the sound of my kettle switching off in the background and a dog barking somewhere down the street. I didn't move. My phone vibrated. A message from Mila, the same college friend. "This is so cool. When did Rami start working with you?" My reply was slow. He didn't. But maybe that wasn't the truth anymore. Maybe he was working with me, around me, over me. The worst part? I wasn't shocked. Not really. Somewhere deep down, I had always known. That room they took from me at 11 was just the first thing. This company might be the last thing they try to take, but they weren't going to get away with it. Not this time. The sun had slipped behind the Flatirons, casting the city in that golden haze that only lasts 10 minutes a day. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a lukewarm cup of chamomile tea I hadn't touched in hours. I wasn't tired, just drained. Like someone had taken the air out of me and left me standing half alive. That's when I found it. An old voicemail from Dad buried deep in my inbox. One of those that never transcribed right. I tapped to play it. His voice came through, crackly and casual. "Hey, kiddo. Just wanted to say, we've decided to use some of the retirement savings to help Romy with his creative launch. You understand, right? He needs visibility. He's got talent." He paused, like waiting for my nod. "Anyway, don't worry about it. You're doing fine." I stared at nothing. The spoon kept spinning on its own. Visibility? I needed groceries, a working laptop, a few months of rent to keep TechSense alive. But Romy needed visibility. I closed the audio. The silence afterward was louder than the message. It wasn't new. I used to think it was bad timing. But patterns tell the truth. Senior year, I had 3 college acceptance letters. I remember sitting in the living room, cat curled by the heater, clutching them like tickets to somewhere better. They barely looked. "Well," Dad said, tapping a pen on the armrest, "we'll see what's left after Romy's tuition." He was off to a performing arts school in Chicago. They paid for a 1-bedroom high-rise, a vocal coach, even leased him a car. I commuted to community college, took the 6:45 bus, ate from vending machines, worked evenings at a bookstore. When I transferred to CU Boulder, no one celebrated. They asked how I'd cover tuition, how many hours I could work. Still, I graduated magna cum laude. No one came to the ceremony. I wasn't angry, just exhausted. That kind of tired that settles into your bones and never leaves. A year later, my grandparents visited. We sat on the back porch, sweating through an Iowa summer. Mira slid an envelope toward me. "Just a little something to get you started." $2,000. I didn't spend it for months. I kept it sealed in a fireproof folder. That's what launched TechSense, my LLC, the domain, a freelance designer. Quiet money, no family conditions, no strings, unlike anything from Galen. A ping pulled me back. Mila again. This time a video, no caption. I clicked. Meet the creative genius behind TechSense. The thumbnail, Romy, in front of my old laptop, wearing my brand colors, talking like he built the whole thing. It was a clean 2-minute promo, Romy pitching his vision of emotional AI. He walked through the office I paid for, sat at my desk, the voiceover. "We believe in reshaping how humans interact with machines." We? At the end, he dropped my name. "Tam? She's great with back-end stuff. Makes the tech run like magic." Like I was some freelancer he brought in. I replayed it, twice. No, it wasn't accidental. It was intentional. Reframing, rewriting. The comments were worse. "Wow, he's brilliant. Didn't his sister start this? Or am I wrong?" No one corrected them. Not my parents, especially not them. I checked our company's pinned social post. It was the same video, shared by Dad. Proud of what Romy's building with TechSense? Something inside me cracked. I closed the laptop, sat still. I thought about deleting everything, shutting it down, but Mira's voice rose up in my head, sharp and clear. You don't walk away from what you built just because someone else's name is on the door. She was right. I opened the laptop again, hovered over the report button. Didn't click. Because maybe it was time to do more than just click. I barely slept. After closing my laptop, I paced the apartment for hours. The video looped in my mind, not the words, but the audacity. His face on my work, his voice calling it ours. Eventually, I sat down and reopened the email from the conference organizers. TechSense, Disrupting Emotional AI, featured speaker Tamara Wozniak, 2 p.m., Denver Convention Center, Main Stage B. Or at least it had said that. By the time I arrived, everything had changed. It was cool outside, but my palms were damp as I stepped through the glass doors. Inside, coffee carts, chatter, investors in clusters. I kept my badge half hidden under my jacket. At registration, the volunteer beamed. You're with TechSense? Rami already checked in. You're listed as contributor. Need help finding your lounge? Contributor. I forced a tight smile. No, I've got it. I pulled up the event app. There it was, 2 p.m., Main Stage B. Empathy in AI, a new era of expression. Speaker, Romy Dillard. Lead Communications, TechSense. My name, at the bottom like a footnote. Research contributor, T. Wozniak. I headed backstage. The media crew looked up. You the slide editor? Someone asked, holding out a tablet. Just synced Romy's changes. His what? He turned the screen. Gone was my talk on ethical data modeling. In its place, pastel slides, buzzwords, Romy's face in full-screen confidence. Title, Feeling the Future. Romy Dillard on Intuitive AI. It felt like a punch to the ribs. I stepped away and called Dad. He answered quickly. Tamara, you at the venue? What is this? I asked. Why is he giving my keynote? Dad sighed like I was overreacting. Sweetheart, don't turn this into a scene. Romy's just better at presenting. You're great with the technical stuff. This is about optics. This is my company. No, it's the family's company, he said. Let him take the spotlight. You've always handled the back end. Always. I hung up. The backstage monitor ticked down. 4 minutes to showtime. I peeked through the curtain. Romy stood center stage, mic in place, blazer sharp and loud. He looked confident, practiced. He waved to someone up front, then flashed that polished grin. The crowd loved it. I asked the stage manager for the final slide deck. He handed me a tablet. Every bullet I'd written had been gutted, swapped with Romy's pet terms. Data feels, human synergy, future presence. Even my closing line, something I'd scribbled at 3 a.m. months ago, was now under his name. When machines understand us emotionally, we understand ourselves better. He hadn't even heard it until 2 weeks ago. The MC took the stage. Please welcome Romy Dillard. The applause came like a wave. I stayed frozen. He launched into his talk with charm and swagger, tossing out buzzwords like candy. The audience laughed, clapped. He gestured to the logo behind him, my logo, and said, This journey began because I saw a need, so I built something. I felt heat behind my eyes. I built the prototype, coded every line, conducted surveys, filed paperwork, scrimped for months while Romy chased acting gigs in Chicago. Now he stood under lights I fought to reach. A man in front of me leaned over and whispered to his colleague, Visionary guy, I'm watching his stock. He's going places. His stock? His vision? I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. This wasn't oversight. This was erasure. Not quietly, not behind the scenes, right here, in public, on the stage that was supposed to be mine. The ovation when he finished was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Romy beamed. I turned away and clenched the printed schedule in my hand until the edges dug into my skin. I didn't cry, but something inside me broke, clean, sharp, and final. And one thought echoed louder than the applause. They weren't just rewriting slides, they were rewriting me. 2 mornings had passed since the Denver conference, but the sting in my chest hadn't dulled. If anything, it had sharpened. The sting had turned into a stone, something heavy and cold sitting just beneath my ribs. I had gone to sleep restless and woken up worse. I reached for my phone out of habit, not intention, and immediately regretted it. There were over a dozen new notifications, push alerts, emails, and Slack messages from our junior devs. Most were about one thing. A headline blinked at the top of my screen. Creative mind Romy Dillard pioneers emotional AI. TechSense leads a new wave. I sat up straighter, thumb frozen mid-scroll. One after another, tech media outlets had picked up the same story. Slightly altered titles, but the same angle. Same hero, same narrative. Romy. I scrolled down the first piece, looking for any mention of me. Nothing. No co-founder bio, not even a footnote in the About section. Not a single sentence acknowledged that I had conceptualized, designed, and developed every line of our core architecture. I refreshed the next article. Same result. I sat back in my chair, phone balanced on my knee, the buzzing in my ears making it hard to hear anything else. For a moment, I wondered if I'd made all of this up. If maybe I was just background noise in my own story. The woman behind the curtain never meant to take a bow. I closed the articles and opened Slack. Zara, my assistant, had sent a brief message. "Hey, I didn't authorize this. You should see where it came from. I'm checking headers now." I called her immediately. "Who sent the press kit?" She didn't even greet me, just launched into it. "Tam, it was your dad. The original blast went out from his firm's media email. That's why it bypassed our approval queue. It looks like he sent it directly to his media contacts." I stood up, walking toward the window like pacing would bring oxygen back into my lungs. And what exactly was in it? A branding doc, new color specs, ones we haven't signed off on, and a paragraph listing Romy as vision director of TechSense. I almost laughed. "We don't have a vision director." Zara paused. "I know." I ended the call without saying goodbye. I needed air. I grabbed my jacket and left the building. The late morning sun was already high over Boulder's skyline, casting hard shadows that made everything look too bright, too fake. I walked a full block before stopping at a coffee shop I hadn't visited since last year. I didn't even go in. I just stood outside, staring blankly at the menu board. I didn't want caffeine. I wanted clarity, but I got neither. Instead, my phone buzzed again. A message from Toby Renner, one of our earliest investors. "Super pumped for the launch party next week. Just saw the invite. Romy hosting? Sounds slick." Attached was a screenshot of the digital invitation. Hosted by Romy Dillard. Featuring the story behind the brand special contributor, Tamara Wozniak. I froze. It felt like the ground shifted under me, but no one else noticed. The woman behind me in line kept talking about almond milk. The guy beside her asked about a gluten-free muffin. The world went on like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. The event was mine. I had planned it for months, booked the venue, curated the guest list, designed the entire program around my launch roadmap. And now I was just the special contributor? Special contributor. Like I'd wandered in off the street with a few ideas and got lucky enough to be included. I walked back to the office in a trance. I didn't hear the street noise. I didn't even remember the crosswalk. I just moved, one foot in front of the other, because if I stopped, I'd start shaking. Back inside TechSense HQ, I took the elevator up alone. When I stepped out onto our floor, I made a beeline to my office, shut the door behind me, and locked it. I called my father. He picked up, voice calm, like we were discussing dinner plans. "Hey Tamara, everything okay? You sent out a launch invite with Romy listed as host." A pause. Then, "He's the better speaker. This is about optics, not ownership." I clenched the armrest of my chair. "It's my launch." "We're not replacing you," he said, "just reframing the narrative. He's the face. You're the foundation. You didn't even ask me. You would have said no." He said it like a fact, not an accusation, like that justified every lie. "It's still your party, sweetie," he added gently, like I was a 5-year-old sulking about a balloon. "You'll be there. You'll speak. You're the brains, not the brand. Don't take it so personally." There was a long silence on my end. Too long. Then I spoke, voice low but certain. "That's not reframing, Dad. That's rewriting." Another silence. I didn't wait for his reply. I ended the call. I stared at my monitor, jaw tight. The cursor blinked on a blank document labeled launch_speech_final.docs final. What a joke. I opened it, scanned line by line. Every place Romy's name had been added, I deleted it. Every anecdote he inserted, I removed. Every moment he tried to steal, I took back. One keystroke at a time, they wanted to rewrite me. But I had the final edit. By the time Friday rolled in, the countdown felt personal. 5 days to launch. 5 days until they either heard me or tried to silence me again. My edits were done. My speech was mine. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some grip on the wheel. That illusion lasted less than 3 hours. My phone rang as I was reviewing logistics with Zara. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach dip. Lori Hampton, one of our largest early-stage investors, and a woman whose opinion could sway half a dozen others. I picked up, adjusting my voice into something polite but unreadable. "Lori, hi." She jumped in, cheerful as ever. "Tamara, I just wanted to say how thrilled I am for next week. I've been telling people about Romy nonstop. You've done such a great job backing him." "Backing him?" My pulse kicked up. "I'm sorry, what?" "The launch party," she said. "It'll be great to meet Romy in person. He seems brilliant. Natural charisma. Founder material." I stood up, pushing my chair back with a sharp scrape. "Lori, I'm hosting the event. It's my company." A pause. Soft, awkward, but unmistakably patronizing. "Oh, that's strange. The invite says he's the founder." It took everything in me not to snap. Instead, I smiled into the phone like she could hear it. "I'll have Zara follow up with the corrected version. Thanks for flagging that." When I ended the call, my hand was shaking. I stared at the screen until Zara's voice pulled me back. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not even a little." Later that afternoon, Mila stopped by the office. We hadn't seen each other in months. Old college roommate turned freelance UX designer. She was in town for a client pitch and wanted to catch up. She looked around the space, impressed. "Tam, this is wild. I mean, from your apartment floor to here? Unreal." I tried to smile. "Yeah, it's been a lot." She wandered past the whiteboards. "So, you and Romy. I didn't even know you two were working together until I saw the video. Crazy how he ended up in AI, right?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Well, he's the idea guy, right? You're like the operations mastermind?" That was it. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but like a small, clean thread finally giving out after years of tension. "No, Mila," I said, voice low and even. "I'm the founder. Romy didn't build this. He didn't write one line of code. He didn't pitch investors. He didn't sit in client calls or sleep under that desk during the first 2 months." She blinked, surprised. "Oh, sorry. I guess the video made it seem—" "I know what the video made it seem like." She didn't respond, just nodded, awkward and quiet, and left a few minutes later. I walked back into my office and shut the door again. And then, I rewrote everything. I pulled up the event script and stripped it clean. No Romy, no fatherly interjections. Just me, my voice, my timeline, my team. I rescheduled investor meetings and marked them as private one-on-ones. I handpicked the top 5 supporters, the ones who knew what I had built before anyone cared, and blocked an hour with each of them before the event. Then, I picked up the phone and called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. She called back 20 minutes later. I didn't wait for pleasantries. "If Dad keeps pushing this, I will go public, and this time I won't give anyone a heads up." She was silent for a beat. Then, "Tamara, do what you need to do." That answer was worse than a fight. It wasn't defiance. It was surrender. It meant she knew and chose to stay silent. After I hung up, I sent Zara the backup protocol. We had talked about this 2 months ago, half joking. Now I wasn't smiling. "Activate the contingency," I typed. "Backup domains, alternate press list, start prepping the live stream gear." She replied within 60 seconds. "Copy that. It's yours. We're ready." I exhaled, finally feeling like I wasn't alone. The sun dipped behind the mountains as I pulled into the parking lot of the launch venue for a final walkthrough. The building looked different now, less like a dream, more like a challenge. It was beautiful. Sleek industrial glass, low-lit wood accents. We'd booked it almost a year ago. Back then, it was about celebration. Now it felt like a battle line. I stood on the sidewalk and stared at the entrance for a long time. In the distance, people were laughing as they exited a nearby brewery. It reminded me of a life I used to crave. Simple. Invisible. but that version of me wouldn't have made it this far. The automatic doors whooshed open, triggered by my stillness. Inside, the space was empty, silent. I took one slow breath and whispered to myself, if they still push me aside after this, I won't be the one holding back. Evening draped itself over Boulder like a silk curtain, quiet but full of tension. I hadn't slept much the night before, and the nerves didn't ease when I arrived at the venue 3 hours early. The catering crew was setting up hors d'oeuvres near the back entrance. Zara was already inside, double-checking tech, checking off names. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Low ambient lighting, elegant floral arrangements, name tags lined up neatly in alphabetical order. Guests would walk into this event thinking they were about to witness a milestone for TechSense. They had no idea it was a battleground. I stayed in the green room for most of the hour before go time, pacing, breathing, reviewing my script again even though I knew it by heart. At exactly 6:55 p.m., the MC stepped onto the stage to a polite round of applause. His voice carried easily through the room. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate the extraordinary rise of a company poised to reshape AI as we know it. I stood just behind the side curtain, hands clasped tightly behind my back. The MC continued, and now please welcome Galen Dillard, proud father of our visionary leader. I froze, my breath caught. Galen? I looked around the green room. No warning, no run sheet showing that name, no slide update, nothing. But there he was, already striding up the steps onto the stage like he owned it. Right behind him, Rami in a tailored navy blazer, hair gelled back, smile confident. And then Galen spoke. This is Rami's moment, his vision, his future. TechSense was just an idea once, and Rami gave it the voice and purpose it needed. We are proud, so proud to stand behind him tonight. Applause swelled. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I started walking, fast, toward the AV table when I heard something from backstage that stopped me cold. It was Dylan, our event coordinator. I hadn't noticed him on the phone. No, we're almost done finalizing the paperwork, he said. Galen already approved the transfer. Romy will get the 51%. It's clean. Trust ownership protects them from board disputes. My feet stopped moving. The noise of the room faded. They weren't just stealing my moment. They were stealing my company. Legally. I stepped into the shadows behind the stage, heart thudding so loud it drowned the crowd. Dylan looked up and saw me. His eyes widened. Tamara. I cut him off with one sentence. Not if I speak first. And I stepped out. The light hit me like a slap, but I didn't blink. I walked straight up to the podium, past Galen, past Romy, who looked stunned for the first time in years. Someone in the audience murmured. A few cameras turned toward me, unsure of what was happening. I didn't wait for permission. I took the mic. The applause had died down. Good. They'd need silence to hear this. My name is Tamara Wozniak, I said steady, and I built TechSense from the ground up. I designed every line of the original software. I pitched the first clients from my living room table. I drained my savings account to pay for version 1. And tonight, you're sitting here under false pretenses, thinking you're celebrating someone else. The room hushed. Behind me, Galen took a step forward, but I turned just enough to warn him. Not now. I looked out again. A sea of confused, blinking eyes. Colleagues, investors, family friends, and Romy, standing there, looking like he couldn't decide whether to smile or run. I'm not here to fight for credit. I'm not here to beg for space. I'm here because this whole circus of narrative swapping, of names moved around like chess pieces, has gone too far. I held up one of the glossy investor packets they'd passed out near the door. On the front, Romy's face, my brand. I'm not a footnote in my own company. I'm not the quiet genius behind the curtain. I'm the founder. And I won't be erased to make someone else more palatable. A heavy silence fell. You could hear the soft click of someone putting down their champagne glass. And let's be very clear, I added, my voice growing harder. No amount of title changes or family backroom deals will change who built this, or who leads it. I set the mic down, and I walked off. Behind me, no applause. But no one left either, which meant they were listening. I was halfway to the green room when Galen caught up to me. His tone was low, almost hissing. "If you embarrass this family again like that, you'll regret it." I stopped, turned. "You should have said that," I said softly, "before you tried to erase me." And I kept walking. The launch event wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the moment they tried to write me out of my own story, that's when I took the pen back. I didn't go back into the main ballroom. After the mic drop, the air outside the curtain was thick, like walking through steam. I needed oxygen. Still gripping the folded edges of my speech in one hand, I ducked into the side lounge tucked behind the cocktail bar. Dim lighting, velvet couches, the kind of space meant for donors or VIPs to decompress. Except I didn't feel like a VIP. I sat, alone, a glass of water in front of me, untouched. Somewhere behind the wall, the party resumed. Music, laughter, the pop of a champagne cork. None of it reached me. The silence in the lounge was sharper than any applause I didn't get. Romy had vanished. I hadn't seen him once since I left the stage. No apology, no attempt, not that I expected one. The door creaked open. I looked up. Galen stepped in, followed by Judith. He was fuming, his nostrils flaring the way they did when I was 13, and asked why Romy got a new iPad when I still used a hand-me-down. "You made your point," he said, voice clipped, "but don't think there won't be consequences." I leaned back, calm on the outside. "There already were. You just didn't notice them because they happened to me." He didn't flinch. "You humiliated this family tonight," he continued, stepping closer. "You made a spectacle out of your ego." "My ego? You mean the company I built?" "No, I mean your refusal to be part of the team." I laughed, quiet and bitter. "By team, you mean the people who lie, edit, and take without asking?" "I mean family." He said it like a brand, not a bond. "I've done with this," Galen snapped. "You're out of the will, out of everything. Don't expect a call. As far as I'm concerned, you're not my daughter." The room didn't spin. It didn't shake. I didn't cry, I just sat very still. Judith was next to him, silent. Her hands clutched the strap of her purse like it could anchor her to something solid. "You really mean that?" I asked him. He nodded once. Clean. Like a man checking off a task. Then another voice entered the room. Deep, slow, familiar. "You don't speak for the whole family, Galen." My grandparents stood in the doorway, Eldon in a beige sweater vest, Mira in navy with silver buttons down the front. They looked small but unshakable. Eldon stepped forward. "Then let us say this clearly in front of witnesses. We already changed the will 3 months ago. Everything we own goes to Tamara," Mira added. "Not a cent to anyone else." Galen spun toward them. "You can't do that." "We did," Eldon replied, unblinking. "After the 3rd board meeting we weren't invited to, after the interviews where Romy spoke about his vision, after Judith called us and said Tamara was overreacting again." Mira's gaze didn't waver. "We watched, we listened, and we decided." The silence was louder than any fight. Judith looked at me then, really looked. Her expression was unreadable. I didn't fill the space. I let her sit in it. "Why did you let him erase me?" I asked. Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't know how to choose," she whispered. "And because you always figured it out. You were the one who didn't need hand-holding or reassurance or help." I waited. "And I thought," she added, tears forming, "maybe you didn't need me." I stood slowly, walked closer until I was just a few feet from her. "I didn't need you to save me," I said. "I needed you to stand next to me." Judith opened her mouth, closed it. Nothing else came. The room emptied. Galen left first, shoulders rigid, jaw tight. Judith followed, pausing only once to glance back. And then it was just me, Zara, and the echo of everything that had been said. Zara walked in silently and wrapped her arms around me. No words, just warmth. Outside, the Colorado night had turned brisk. I stepped out, breathing in the crisp air that smelled faintly of pine and earth. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest didn't crush. It anchored. We walked toward the parking lot, me and the few people who hadn't turned away. Then I saw him, Romy, standing near the valet, alone. Arms crossed, face pale, eyes locked on me. His jaw twitched. He didn't say a word. I didn't either. He wanted the spotlight, but he didn't expect the firestorm. By the time I walked through my apartment door that night, my heels ached and my mind felt raw. I dropped my bag on the entry bench, peeled off my jacket, and stood there in silence, surrounded by dim lighting and the soft hum of the fridge. I didn't need to replay everything. I'd lived it. My voice, the tremor in Romy's face, the way the audience had sat still as truth cut through pretense. I showered, slept, barely, and woke just after 6 a.m. to the buzz of my phone. 32 new emails. Most subject lines blurred together until one stopped me. Bradshaw Capital. Ultimatum enclosed. My breath stalled. I opened it. The message was short, precise. Per recent public clarity and performance, we require the immediate removal of Romy Dillard as a public-facing representative of TechSense. Should this not occur, Bradshaw Capital will suspend funding effective immediately. No hedging, no perhaps or discussion points. They weren't asking. They were drawing a line. I set the phone down slowly. The quiet of my kitchen felt like armor. 2 hours later, I walked into the TechSense boardroom in downtown Boulder. Polished glass, cool morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Zara had already set out the presentation packets and coffee. She nodded at me once, confident, assured. Across the table, the board, 4 voting members. Romy, seated at the far end, looked like he hadn't slept, his face blotchy, eyes glassy, no sign of Galen. Judith sat beside Romy, lips pursed, hands folded tightly on her lap. I stood at the head of the table, no PowerPoint, just words. "Thank you for being here," I began. "I'll be brief." I laid out the facts, the false narrative, the unauthorized press releases, the attempted power shift via trust documents. I placed a copy of the Bradshaw email in front of each board member. Then I looked them straight in the eye. You cannot build trust on illusion, and I won't let mine be traded for appearances. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the clock ticking. Then Board Chair Marla Sandin nodded once and said, "Motion to re-establish Tamara Wozniak as sole public and legal representative of TechSense, effective immediately." "Seconded," came another voice. "Approved," said the third. Unanimous. I sat down as the resolution was finalized. Romy didn't speak. His shoulders sagged. Judith leaned over and whispered something I couldn't hear. He didn't look up. By that afternoon, the TechSense media team had already issued the correction. Statement from founder and CEO Tamara Wozniak. It hit every major tech outlet by the evening. Forbes, TechCrunch, local stations. I didn't gloat. Instead, I answered only one interview request from a quiet podcast that championed women in leadership. I told them, when people try to rewrite you out of your own story, you don't scream louder. You write clearer. Within 48 hours, Romy deleted his Twitter, then Instagram, then LinkedIn, one by one, like he was scrubbing away evidence of someone he didn't want to be anymore. Late that night, my phone lit up. Judith. I stared at the screen. I answered. There was a long pause before she spoke. "Will you come by the house sometime?" Her voice was thin. Not weak, but like someone trying to reach across a distance they'd created. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Maybe," I said, "but not now." A soft exhale came through the line. She didn't argue. The next ping was a text from Mira. "You did it, baby, and you did it with grace." No lecture, no instructions, just love in the quietest way that mattered. I sat at my desk around 10 p.m., alone in the warm glow of my office lamp. The launch party was over. The fallout was settling. But I wasn't empty. In front of me, my laptop blinked. A new file. Next_chapter_idea.docs. I hovered my fingers over the keyboard. Outside, the night air curled against the window. But inside, it felt steady. I whispered to the stillness. I didn't burn bridges. I built one, far away from them. The morning light had a different kind of warmth now, not softer exactly, just less sharp around the edges. It had been almost a month since the launch party, since the mic, the fallout, and the fractured parts of my life being laid bare under stage lights. These days, I started mornings in a co-working space across town. It wasn't glamorous. two tall plants, humming Wi-Fi, a coffee machine that sputtered more than brewed. But it was mine. My mornings had become a ritual. I brewed peppermint tea instead of drowning in caffeine. I sat by the window, notebook open, even if the words didn't come easily. That morning I scribbled just one line. Closure doesn't mean agreement. It means I stopped bleeding. That was enough. I hadn't returned to the TechSense main office yet, not because I was afraid, but because I was busy building the version of leadership I wanted to live by. Quiet, honest, unbending. Every Sunday, I drove across town to my grandparents' place. Mira's front garden always had something blooming, no matter the season. Eldon always wore the same sweater, no matter the weather. We didn't talk about the party anymore, or Romy, or my parents. Instead, it was tomatoes and taxes, the dogwood tree out front, his old car that he swore still ran better than anything off a lot today. One afternoon after we finished lunch and Mira handed me a fresh jar of plum jam, she said, "You know, we didn't leave you the estate because of money." I looked up, surprised. She smiled, folding a napkin. "We did it because you chose dignity when you had every reason not to." I didn't say anything. I just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Judith hadn't called since the night of the board meeting. Galen hadn't either. But I heard things. A former family friend mentioned Galen was skipping social events, didn't show at the regional gala, hadn't renewed his membership at the golf club. And Romy? He launched a podcast, then a YouTube channel. I watched one episode. The views were low, the comments were worse. He'd deleted the channel by week 3. And strangely, I didn't feel vindicated. No pride, no satisfaction. Just a sense of distance, like watching someone else's story through glass. Then one morning, my phone buzzed. Judith. Her name blinked up from an unsaved number. The message was short. "I still don't know how to be a mother to you, but I hope someday I can try." I reread it twice. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. A few weeks later, on a bright Saturday, I found myself wandering Pearl Street. The street performers were out, a violinist playing near the ice cream stand. The breeze carried the smell of coffee and something grilled. I was halfway through the block when a woman stopped me. "You're her, right?" she said, eyes lighting up. "From that AI event, the one who spoke up." I paused. "Yeah, that was me." She smiled wide. "That was brave. It meant something." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. She walked away, and I stood there, not proud, just present, whole. Back home, I opened my laptop. A blank document stared back at me. New_project_outline.docs. This one wouldn't be built on reaction. It wouldn't be about proving anything. This one was just mine. I leaned back, stretching as the light shifted across the floor. My reflection in the dark screen wasn't someone waiting for permission anymore. I had been erased, yes, but I rewrote myself. And the new version? She was quieter, stronger, still scarred, but no longer wounded. I closed the laptop and said it out loud, just once. I used to think family defined me. Now I know, I get to decide what defines me. And now that you've heard my story, from silence to speaking up, from being erased to rewriting myself, let me leave you with this. I used to think loyalty meant staying quiet, that family meant sacrificing your truth, that being strong meant not rocking the boat. But strength, real strength, is knowing when to draw a line and say, "This ends with me." If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, if you've ever watched your hard work become someone else's spotlight, if you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, even when it cost you your voice, then please hear me now. You are not selfish for wanting credit. You are not dramatic for needing boundaries, and you are never wrong for reclaiming your story, especially when others tried to write you out of it. This isn't just about business. It's about self-worth. It's about learning that your value isn't up for debate. Not by family, not by culture, not by silence. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all. You don't need their permission to live fully. You just need your own. So let me ask you, have you ever been in Tamara's shoes? What would you have done at that launch party? Or better yet, what would your message be to someone still stuck in that silence? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you. Tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know what part of the world or the US you're in. And if this wasn't your kind of story, that's okay too. Let me know what you think and what kinds of truths you're living through. And hey, if stories like this speak to you, if they help you feel seen or understood, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Because your voice deserves a space too. Thanks for listening. Hi, my name's Jacintha, and a few weeks ago, I found out my husband was secretly filing for divorce behind my back. But that wasn't even the worst part. He'd been moving money, our money, into accounts I didn't even know existed, planning to leave me with nothing, while smiling at me across the dinner table. It started with a whisper in the middle of the night, and what I uncovered after that, it changed everything. What do you do when the person you trusted most makes you a ghost in your own life? Would you stay silent or strike back? I woke up thirsty, the kind of dry-mouth discomfort that won't let you fall back asleep. I didn't check the time. I knew it was late. The kind of late where everything's still except for the things that shouldn't be. Our bedroom was cold. The windows had been cracked open from earlier that day, letting in the spring air that still carried a bite. I reached for my robe, slid my feet into slippers, and padded softly down the hallway, hoping not to wake Declan. But I didn't need to worry about that. He wasn't in bed. As I turned the corner past the living room, a faint light spilled from the kitchen. I slowed my steps, pausing just outside the doorway. I heard his voice. Low, controlled, the way you speak when you don't want to be overheard. No, she has no idea, he was saying. It's already filed. My spine stiffened. There was a long silence. Then I heard the sound of his thumb flicking over his phone screen. Another quiet sentence. Just let the paperwork work for itself. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Declan had never taken calls at night. Not like this. He didn't whisper. He didn't hide. And yet, here he was, speaking as if he was planning something I wasn't supposed to hear. I stayed in place long enough to catch my breath turning shallow, my pulse in my ears. Then I stepped back quietly and slipped into the hallway. By the time I got back to the bedroom, I could hear him coming down the hall behind me. I crawled back under the covers, turned away from the door, and steadied my breathing. The mattress shifted under his weight. I felt the tension in his body for a split second before he let out a relaxed sigh and settled in, as if nothing had happened. I closed my eyes and didn't say a word, but my mind was screaming. Morning came, and Declan got up before I did, just like always. He said he had an early meeting downtown and left without breakfast. I watched him walk out the door like he hadn't planted a bomb the night before. After the door clicked shut, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same chair where he'd whispered those words. Something about the way he said, "It's already filed," had sat in the back of my brain like a splinter I couldn't ignore. I wasn't stupid. I knew what divorce papers sounded like, even when you dressed them up in legalese. I also knew Declan wasn't just some impulsive husband having second thoughts. He planned everything, his calendar, his investments, even our grocery list. If he'd said it was filed, that meant it wasn't just an idea. It was in motion. I walked back to our bedroom and sat at his desk. Declan kept his personal laptop there, closed but not locked. He never assumed I'd look. And I hadn't, not in all these years. But today was different. The moment I lifted the lid, the screen came to life. No password prompt. His inbox was open. It felt like breaking into a church, sacred but necessary. I didn't search. I just glanced through the tabs. That's when I saw it. A drafted email, never sent, titled Divorce Filing Strategy. I clicked. My stomach tightened. Inside were bullet points. File in Travis County to limit delays. Begin withdrawal of accounts. Slowly, avoid joint account freeze. Split into temporary subholdings. Schedule mediation after 30 days. Keep her uninformed until filing is confirmed. There was more. Advice from someone named Martin that read like it came from a lawyer who'd done this before. If she challenges you, claim miscommunication. Stay calm. The court likes composed men. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I forwarded the email to myself. Then I deleted the draft from his account and cleared the browser history. I sat there for a minute, staring at my reflection in the black screen. Something inside me fractured, but something else sharpened. The old me would have confronted him that night, asked questions, demanded truth. The version of me that sat there now didn't need answers. She needed a plan. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. He wanted me uninformed. He wanted me off balance. He wanted to outmaneuver me in my own home. But he underestimated the one thing I had over him. I listened. And now, I knew. I didn't sleep much after that night. Even with the bedroom door shut and the windows drawn, I felt exposed, like something sacred had been broken, while I was still pretending to believe in it. By the time the sun came through the blinds, I had already showered, dressed, and made the coffee before Declan stirred. When he walked into the kitchen, he looked refreshed, humming to himself as if he hadn't just detonated a grenade under our marriage. "Morning," he said casually, pouring himself a cup. "You're up early." I smiled, just enough to make it believable. "Couldn't sleep." "Too much on your mind?" I stirred my coffee, watching the way the cream folded in. "Something like that?" He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So listen, I was thinking, it might be smart if we went ahead and combined all our accounts. Just to simplify things, in case something ever happens. Emergencies and stuff." I paused, just for a second. Not long enough to give away anything. Then I nodded slowly. "That's considerate." He smiled, satisfied with himself like a man who believed he was 2 steps ahead. "I can take care of everything. Just need your login for the retirement account and the secondary savings. We'll make a spreadsheet, keep things clean." I watched him sip his coffee, relaxed. He really thought I'd just hand it all over. Declan had always been good at delivering bad news inside good manners. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply made suggestions that weren't really suggestions, decisions disguised as teamwork. "Let me look at a few things first," I said lightly. "Then we can talk through it." "Of course," he replied, as if the outcome was already written. "No rush." He left for the office around 9, after making a call out on the patio. I pretended to read emails at the dining table, but I was listening through the screen door. I couldn't make out every word, just enough. "It's moving." "Yeah, she's not pushing back yet." By 10, he was gone. I moved through the house slowly, intentionally, like I was checking a body for signs of life. Everything was still in place. Our framed vacation photos, his running shoes by the front door, the bills he never paid stacked neatly on the counter. But something about the air felt thinner, as if the house had already started emptying itself of what was real. In the kitchen, I noticed a sheet of paper pinned to the fridge. I hadn't seen it there the day before. At first glance, it looked like a basic printout. Colored blocks, headings, bullet points. But then I saw the title, Q2 Personal Finance Overview. I pulled it down and sat at the table. Declan had listed out every asset, down to our tax deductions. There was a whole section titled Post-Separation Financial Model. The language was polished, strategic. His IRA, projected returns, health premiums, real estate reallocation. There was nothing under joint planning, not even a placeholder. There wasn't a single mention of my name, not in the headers, not in the footnotes, not even in the section marked Household Obligations. Just one quiet erasure, neatly typed in 12-point font. I stared at the paper, fingers pressing into the edges until they curled. This wasn't about filing for divorce anymore. This was about vanishing me from the future he was still planning to benefit from. Quietly, neatly. As if I had been a chapter he could footnote and skip. As if I hadn't sacrificed time, energy, and parts of myself he never even thanked me for. I laid the sheet down and stood up, slow, walked over to the trash, folded the paper twice, dropped it in. Then I walked to my room and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. the one with the documents he never cared to ask about. Birth certificate, college records, employment contracts, a bank account he never knew existed. Funny how men like him think they're the only ones who know how to keep secrets. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I wrote down 2 things on a legal pad. 1. Do not engage. 2. Move before he thinks you can. He'd already started building a life I wasn't supposed to notice until it was too late. But now that I had, I was going to make sure he never forgot it. I folded the paper into my purse and closed the drawer softly, as if the contents inside could hear me thinking. The weight of those documents, things he never cared to ask about, suddenly felt like the only thing anchoring me. The rest of that day moved in slow stretches. I washed the dishes that had piled up. I watered the plants. I answered 2 emails for work, both of which I read twice before replying. Anything to keep my hands busy while my mind sprinted. That night, Declan came home later than usual. Said traffic was a mess on Lamar. He talked about some client who needed him to redo a pitch deck last minute. I nodded, like a good listener, like the woman who didn't know the truth. He went to bed early, exhausted. I lay next to him for an hour, eyes open, heart steady, mind full. By morning, I had a plan. After he left for work, I waited until the front door shut and the garage door rumbled closed behind him. Then I pulled my laptop to the kitchen table. I hadn't looked at our joint accounts in months, maybe longer. Declan always handled that part. He liked being the numbers guy, and I let him. Until now, I logged in. The page loaded slow, like even the internet knew what I was about to see. At first glance, nothing looked wrong. The balance wasn't shockingly low. There weren't any huge red flag withdrawals. But as I clicked into the transaction history, a pattern started to form. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to be deliberate. Transfer reserve. Vendor holding fee. 3P allocation. It read like financial static. Codes meant to confuse someone who wasn't supposed to ask questions. But I was asking now. I opened a blank spreadsheet and began to copy each suspicious transaction over. Color-coded, labeled by date, totaled by month. April, flagged to $200, May, $2,450, June, $1,875, July, $3,100. It wasn't the total that got me, it was the regularity, like someone making payments on a plan. Quiet, methodical, premeditated. Then I Googled one of the transaction descriptions, 3P allocation services. The first result was a financial advisory firm based out of Delaware. Shell companies, asset reallocation services, discrete support for personal transitions. I didn't need to read further. He wasn't just filing for divorce, he was funneling resources. It hit me then. I wasn't just being removed from his future. I was being financially ghosted before the ink even hit the paperwork. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I closed the laptop slowly, stood up, and walked to the sink. The morning light had shifted across the countertop, and the silence in the house pressed in from every corner. I leaned against the counter and stared at the toaster, seeing nothing. How many times had I shrugged things off? The Bluetooth calls in the backyard. The networking dinners where he came home without a receipt or a real story. The time he said, "It's just a tax thing," when I glanced at his screen and he closed the tab like it burned. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I didn't want to be that wife. The nag. The overthinker. But that wasn't it. I hadn't looked closer because some part of me, the part that still remembered what he used to be, didn't want it to be true. Now I had no choice but to see. I walked to the garage and sat in the car, phone in hand, not to cry, not to scream, but to think without walls. I pulled out the yellow pad again. Do not engage. Move before he thinks you can. Confirm pattern. Freeze access. I glanced up at the garage shelves, the ones with the bins I packed, the ones he never touched. Inside one was a folder with my personal bank info from back when I managed my own money. I'd closed that account years ago, or so I thought. Turns out, I just stopped using it. But it was still there, still open, still mine. And now, it was going to be my exit hatch. I drove to the credit union just after lunch, parked in the back lot, went inside with a scarf around my shoulders and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The woman behind the desk looked up, polite. "How can I help you today?" I slid my ID across the counter. "I need to reactivate an account and move some money, discreetly." She blinked once, then nodded. "Of course, ma'am, let's get started." By the time I left the credit union, the wind had picked up. Not in a stormy way, just enough to remind me things were shifting. I drove home with the windows down, letting the breeze tangle my hair and cool the back of my neck. I didn't turn on music. I needed the quiet to think. The house felt too still when I walked in. I placed my bag on the entry table, kicked off my flats, and made my way to the kitchen. There was a stack of unopened mail near the microwave, credit card offers, lawn service flyers, and one envelope from our bank. I opened it, half thinking it was a statement. It wasn't. Instead, it was a confirmation letter. "We received your request to remove Jacintha Greaves from joint checking ending in 82XX. Pending document verification." What request? I didn't send anything. I hadn't authorized a change. My heart didn't race. It went quiet, sharp. I folded the letter, walked straight to my office, and pulled up the voicemail tab on my phone. A call from the bank had come through that morning. I had missed it by 7 minutes. The message was robotic but clear. "We're calling to confirm a submitted authorization to remove a party from a shared account. Please contact us immediately to verify." I played the message again, just to be sure. He'd tried to cut me out. Not by yelling, not by fighting, but by signing a few papers and hoping I'd be too late to stop it. I grabbed the house phone, dialed the bank's fraud division, and asked for the account team. 20 minutes later, the account was frozen. A fraud hold was placed, and I'd set alerts for any transaction above $200. I hung up the phone, poured a glass of water, and sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were steady. My breath, even. I wasn't scared. I was past scared. I was reading the manual for a game he thought I didn't know existed. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to water the front plants. Not because they needed it, but because I needed air. I was halfway through misting the hydrangeas when I heard someone call my name. "Hey there, Jacintha!" It was Mr. Griggs, our neighbor across the street. Retired, chatty, and a bit nosy, but never rude. He waved from his driveway, walking over in his usual tan hat and cargo shorts. "Haven't seen you two in a few days," he said. "Thought you might be on vacation or moving. Saw the U-Haul here Tuesday." I blinked. "U-Haul?" He nodded, sipping from his travel mug. "Yeah, came around noon. Young guys moved a few things out the garage. Declan said you were clearing space, said something about early spring cleaning." I felt the world slow, but my face didn't change. "Oh, right. I must have missed it. Thanks for letting me know." He smiled and wandered back toward his driveway. I waved and went back inside, closing the front door quietly behind me. I walked to the garage. The overhead light flickered on. I looked at the shelves where we'd kept backup tools, off-season decorations, and old photo bins. The boxes were gone, not all of them, just the ones labeled cables, winter gear, and MISC office. At first glance, it didn't seem like much, but I knew what was in them: our external hard drives, backup tax files, his old journals, our first photo albums. He was erasing me, one bin at a time. I stood in the middle of the space and realized something chilling. He wasn't just moving forward without me. He was trying to make it look like I'd never been part of it. No fight, no closure, just removal. I walked back inside and texted my lawyer, Faye. "Need to talk, urgent, property manipulation." She replied 3 minutes later. "Free at 6, I'll call." I leaned against the counter and watched the sun start to dip behind the backyard fence. You don't always notice when someone stops making room for you in their life. Sometimes they do it slowly, by moving your boxes, changing your passwords, writing you out of plans they pretend still include you. But once you see it, once it's visible, you can't unsee it. And I had seen enough. After I hung up with Faye that night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear. Something colder had taken its place. Something more focused. I spent the next day moving silently through the house, not touching much, but scanning everything. It was like realizing the wallpaper you always liked was covering cracks underneath. Hairline fractures that had been growing longer than you dared admit. Around mid-afternoon the next day, while I was rinsing off a plate in the sink, a soft ding echoed from the other side of the kitchen. I turned to see my old iPad light up on the counter. I hadn't used it in over a year, maybe 2. I'd only kept it plugged in for access to old files and some photos I never transferred. But now, somehow, it had received a message. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked it up. The screen was already awake. No name, just a local area code and one message. She thinks everything's normal. The timing's perfect. My throat tightened. I stared at the words, reading them once, then again, slower. The timing's perfect. I didn't need to guess who she was, or who had sent it. Somewhere out there, Declan was talking about me, about this moment. And whoever he was speaking to thought I was still in the dark. I stood motionless, holding the iPad as if it might bite. Then I did what I'd trained myself to do. I took a screenshot, airdropped it to my secure email folder, and powered the device off. No panic, no meltdown. I placed it face down on the table and sat, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something denser, like lead in the chest. They were watching the clock. I opened my laptop and pulled up my documents. For years, Declan had assumed I wasn't interested in the legal side of anything, that I didn't read the fine print, that I didn't remember the difference between an LLC and an S-Corp. He forgot I used to brief attorneys on contract risks in my 20s, that I read faster than I spoke, that I might have chosen silence, but I never chose ignorance. The message had cracked something open, and within the hour, I had a call booked with Faye the next day, just in case. Around 4:45, I left the house. I didn't tell anyone, didn't leave a note. I just drove. I didn't know exactly where I was going until I found myself pulling into the lot of a strip mall near Congress and 7th. CVS sat at the end of the row. I parked facing away from the storefront, the fading sun casting long shadows across the dashboard. I needed a place that wasn't mine. I pulled out my phone and began organizing documents into folders. Proof of income, property ownership records, a timeline of joint expenses and shared purchases. I labeled each one cleanly, precisely. Then the notification came, a DM on LinkedIn, of all places. Hey Jacintha, I know it's been years, but I think you need to know something. The name hit me like a glass of cold water. Harper Vexley. We'd been in the same section at law school. She'd always been brilliant, quiet, observant. We weren't close, but I trusted her instincts even then. Her next message followed within seconds. I can't say much over chat, but I consult part-time for a firm in Wilmington. Your husband has been moving money. Delaware LLC. It's structured to dissolve quickly. You should check the filings. I stared at the message, feeling my heartbeat shift into something new. Certainty. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. It was a dismantling. Quiet. Legal. Calculated. And now, someone outside the walls of our home had confirmed it. I didn't reply to Harper, not right away. I didn't need to. Instead, I dialed Faye's office. Her assistant answered, "Hi, it's Jacintha Greaves. Tell Faye I'm ready to file a formal inquiry on financial concealment. I'll send the documents tonight." The assistant didn't ask questions. She just said, "Got it. She'll prep the packet." I hung up, then leaned back in my seat. In the space of 2 days, I had gone from suspicious wife to active witness, from waiting for the blow to preparing the defense. Declan was right about one thing. The timing was perfect, but not for him. The next morning started like it had so many times before. coffee, quiet, and a little sunlight cutting through the blinds. But under all that routine, I knew what had to be done. After double-checking the files I sent to Faye the night before, I packed a manila folder with supporting documents, income verification, statements, screenshots. I tucked it into my bag and left the house without saying a word. Declan was at the gym, like clockwork. He always went around 8. Same playlist, same routine, same sense of invincibility. The bank branch I chose wasn't the one closest to home. It was one we rarely used, tucked between a dry cleaner and a dentist's office off Lamar. The parking lot was half empty. I liked that. Less chance of someone noticing something they weren't meant to. Inside, the walls smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet. The man at the front desk asked how he could help. I told him I needed a private meeting with someone from account services. Nothing urgent, just something that needed a little discretion. Within 15 minutes, I was seated across from a woman named Carmen. Her blazer was a little too large for her frame, but her voice was steady, and she listened like someone who'd seen worse. "I need to transfer all funds from this joint account," I said, handing over the folder, "into this trust account. All of it. Today." She reviewed the documents, scanning through names, dates, authorizations. I watched her eyes flick across each page, occasionally glancing up at me like she was trying to gauge how much I knew. "Do you have the original trust paperwork?" I slid it across the desk. "Pages are signed and notarized. You'll see the stamp on the third sheet." Carmen nodded slowly. "All right, everything looks legitimate." She paused just a second too long. "Can I ask, has the other party been notified of this move?" I met her eyes. "Not yet, but he will be, eventually." The rest happened quickly. Wire authorizations, closing forms, confirmation emails. I didn't flinch once. I wasn't worried about getting caught. I was too far past that. When she handed me the final printout, she hesitated. "Are you okay?" I smiled, soft but deliberate. "Now I am." I walked out of that office $30,000 lighter on paper, but I'd never felt more in control. Back at home, I let the silence wrap around me. I didn't play music. I didn't turn on the TV. I just sat, waiting. At 6:12 p.m., the knock came. 3 short taps. Not rushed, not hesitant. I opened the door to a man in a navy jacket holding a slim envelope. "Mrs. Greaves?" "Yes." He handed it to me. "You've been served. Have a good evening." I took it without a word. Closed the door, turned the deadbolt. Inside, I sat on the couch and opened the envelope. I expected some grand gesture, an apology wrapped in legalese, or at least something resembling decency. What I got was a clean, overly formal petition for divorce. Structured paragraphs, legal boilerplate, a neat list of assets, each item followed by a percentage Declan believed he was entitled to. He had even broken down our accounts line by line. Joint savings, $84,200. I laughed. Not loudly, just a sharp exhale. That account, as of 6 hours ago, had exactly $27.44 in it. The rest had been legally moved, with receipts and timestamps to prove it. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the page, and texted it to Faye. Caption: "Filed after, we're clear." She replied instantly. "Perfect. Let him come after what doesn't exist." For the rest of the evening, I didn't read the petition again. I didn't call anyone. I poured myself a glass of water, took off my shoes, and folded laundry like nothing had changed. But everything had. This wasn't a story about being blindsided anymore. This was the part where the person you underestimated quietly takes control of the narrative. He thought he had outpaced me. He thought he moved first. He forgot I was raised to see silence not as surrender, but as setup. 5 days later, I walked into the courthouse like someone showing up to settle a quiet business dispute. Calm on the outside, layered armor underneath. The mediation room smelled of polished wood and recycled air, the kind of space built for civil conversations that begin with pleasantries and end with settlements disguised as victories. Declan was already seated when I arrived, dressed in a light gray suit he only wore to impress people he hoped to intimidate. He didn't look at me when I entered, didn't smile. He was pretending this was just another transaction. I wasn't playing that part anymore. Faye sat beside me, composed, a folder in her lap. Across from us, Declan's lawyer, a man named Rick Ford, had his arms crossed, leaning back like this was already in the bag. It wasn't. Rick started the meeting by listing off expected assets. He spoke with the confidence of someone who thought the opponent didn't read beyond page 2 of a contract. His voice was steady, his tone casual, like this was inevitable. We'll be requesting 50% of the joint savings, plus an equal division of retirement accounts and business holdings based on pre-2017 contributions. Faye waited. She didn't blink. Anything else? She asked politely, flipping open our file. Yes, Rick continued. Since Mrs. Greaves hasn't contested the petition, we're also seeking ownership of the condo. It's been Declan's primary residence. That's not accurate, Faye cut in, still sounding pleasant. The condo is a marital asset, but more importantly, the accounts you're referring to have already been lawfully moved, 3 weeks before your client filed. She placed a packet in the center of the table, neatly bound, stamped, time-coded. Rick looked up, confused. Excuse me? Declan shifted, his expression hardening. Faye didn't flinch. My client executed a full transfer of her legally entitled share of marital funds into a protected trust, all within the bounds of Texas community property law. She acted before your client filed, which means there's nothing for him to claim from those accounts. Silence, long enough to feel like something cracked. Declan's jaw tightened. I saw it then, the first flicker of awareness that he was behind. Not ahead, not in control. Rick flipped through the pages, skimming the stamps. These were filed on April 8th? Correct. That was weeks before. Yes, Faye said gently. It was. Across the table, Declan's fingers curled into his palm. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His face said enough. But that wasn't the only surprise we brought. Inez Calderon entered the room 10 minutes later, crisp blouse, tablet in hand. A forensic accountant Faye had worked with on other cases. Quiet, exacting, brilliant. Rick looked confused. Who is this? Faye didn't even look up. Our financial verification expert. She reviewed your client's asset disclosures. We had some concerns. Inez tapped her screen. The account listed under Independent Holdings, account ending in 9413, didn't exist on the date of filing. It was opened 2 weeks later and backdated internally to avoid scrutiny. That's illegal. Declan finally broke his silence. That's not true, he said flatly. That account was created in March. Inez didn't blink. No, it wasn't. She slid a printed copy of the bank metadata across the table. I verified directly with the institution. Timestamp logs are immutable. Whoever helped you file those numbers either didn't check or assumed no one would. Rick pulled the documents toward him, frowning. The mediator, a woman in her 60s, with a look that said she'd seen this dance too many times, leaned forward. We'll need a recess, Rick muttered. Faye gave a courteous nod. Of course. As we stepped into the hallway, Declan followed a few steps behind. When he caught up, he leaned in, voice low but tight. You really think this makes you the winner? I turned to him calmly. I think it makes me someone you'll stop underestimating. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're making this uglier than it needs to be. That word, ugly, almost made me laugh. As if what he'd done was clean. As if financial manipulation, hidden accounts, and silent erasure were somehow gentlemanly. I didn't respond. Not because I was afraid, but because nothing I could say would teach him what the consequences already had. Back inside, the room was colder. Rick was quieter. Declan had gone pale. The rest of the session moved slowly. They asked for time to review. Faye agreed. We didn't rush. When it ended, no one smiled. No handshakes, no goodbyes. Just me walking out of the courthouse, shoulders straight, head clear. That was the day the mask slipped. Not just for him, but for me too. Because for the first time, the people in the room didn't see me as someone fragile or passive. They saw me as the one who'd already planned for this moment, while everyone else was still writing the opening argument. The morning after mediation, I woke up to an email from Faye. The subject line read, "Settlement proposal attached." I didn't open it right away. I got dressed first, slowly. I made coffee, wiped down the kitchen counter, and watched a squirrel dart along the back fence, completely unaware of what it meant to be cornered. When I finally opened the email, the attachment was as expected. Polished, careful, full of assumptions. Declan's team was offering what they called a reasonable and amicable resolution, 30% of assets, a non-disparagement clause, an NDA covering the events of the past 6 months, financially, legally, and personally. In exchange, no lawsuits, no further public action. It was wrapped in corporate speak to avoid unnecessary emotional distress and protracted legal expense. I sat at the dining table and read the last page 3 times. Then I closed my laptop, walked to the sliding door, and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was just high enough to sting the corner of my eyes. I stood there, letting it hit my face, steadying myself in the stillness. This wasn't peace. It was hush money. Declan didn't want resolution. He wanted quiet, clean hands. A way to say, she agreed, so that the version of the story he'd already started selling wouldn't unravel. But I hadn't come this far to be edited out with polite signatures and legal courtesy. I walked back inside, reopened the email, and typed 2 words. We decline. I hit send, then texted Faye. Sent the response. Let's finish this the right way. She replied immediately. See you Friday. Courtroom 3C. We have the floor. The week passed with a strange sense of calm. Declan didn't call. Didn't show up unannounced. His silence wasn't respectful. It was strategic. He was waiting to see if I'd fold. He was about to be disappointed. Friday came, and the courtroom was as sterile as every other legal space I'd stepped into these past few months. Neutral walls, stiff chairs, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look exhausted. We didn't speak before it started. He avoided my eyes. I didn't offer him a single glance. The hearing moved quickly. Faye summarized our position with precision. No dramatics, just facts. When the judge asked if I had anything to add before finalizing the motion, I stood up. It wasn't planned. Faye looked at me, surprised but trusting. I stepped forward. I'm not here for revenge, I began, my voice steady. And I'm not asking for more than what's right. But I do want the record to reflect something that's not in the financials or filings. The judge nodded. Go ahead, Ms. Greaves. I let the silence hang long enough for everyone to look at me, especially Declan. Next time you want to erase a woman quietly, I said, pausing just enough, try someone who hasn't already learned how to disappear. The room went still. Even the clerk stopped typing. I turned and walked back to my seat. No one said a word. The judge cleared her throat, gave a firm nod, and brought the gavel down. Motion approved. Just like that, it was over. No fireworks, no dramatic exits. Just the sound of legal closure and Declan not looking up as I passed him in the aisle. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't even turn on the radio. The only sound was the hum of tires and the wind pushing against the windows. When I pulled into the driveway, I parked and stayed seated for a while. The house looked different now, still mine, but not the same, and maybe that was the point. I went inside, changed out of my courtroom dress, and put a kettle on. While the water boiled, I opened a blank document on my laptop. I titled it, What No One Tells You About Leaving Quietly. I didn't write anything yet. I just stared at the blinking cursor. Because sometimes, winning doesn't feel like celebration. Sometimes it feels like a deep breath after holding it for too long. And sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk away, while they're still waiting for you to break. 2 weeks passed, though I stopped counting after the first few days. It was easier that way. Easier to let the structure of a new life settle in without constantly looking at the clock like something was supposed to return. The apartment was smaller than the house. Just 2 bedrooms, open kitchen, tall windows that made the afternoon light spill in like it was trying to say, "This is yours now." The balcony overlooked part of downtown, just far enough from the noise, but close enough to see movement, to know life kept going. I stood there now, barefoot, a mug of tea in my hands as the wind tugged gently at my sleeves. Boxes sat stacked in the corner behind me, not untouched, but opened halfway. Not because I was stalling, but because I wanted each thing I placed on a shelf to matter, to feel chosen. I didn't want to carry the past into the future like clutter. I'd done enough of that already. My phone buzzed on the table behind me. I walked inside, picked it up, and saw a message from Faye. "Final paperwork has been stamped and filed. You're officially done." Just like that. No parade, no champagne, no one waiting outside to tell me congratulations. Just a soft ding, a text, and a woman in her 40s standing in a space she paid for, finally alone. I poured the last of my tea into the sink and rinsed the mug. I didn't cry. I wasn't sad, not exactly. There was an ache, but it wasn't grief, it was release, like when your shoulders finally drop after carrying something for too long. I sat on the edge of the couch, picked up my laptop, and opened the file I had created after the court hearing. What I wish I knew before I stayed too long. I stared at the blinking cursor again. This time, I started typing. Not a memoir, not a tell-all, just lessons, quiet truths. A list of things women don't say out loud, because we're taught that survival is supposed to be silent. That if you handled it with grace, it meant you didn't suffer. I wrote the first line. You can be smart, capable, loving, and still be lied to. Then the second. And that doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. Outside, a car horn echoed faintly below, followed by a child's laughter somewhere in the distance. I paused, listened, and for the first time in a while, didn't brace for anything to fall apart. I thought about Declan, where he might be now. If he was sitting in some office pretending none of this had touched him. If he was back in our old house, walking through rooms he once tried to claim with legal jargon and empty charm. I didn't hate him, not anymore. He had built a version of himself that couldn't bear the weight of being truly seen, and when I saw him anyway, he folded. He didn't lose in court. He lost long before that, when he believed being loud made him right, and that my silence meant surrender. Rumors had started, not because I opened my mouth, but because people notice. His colleagues, our mutual acquaintances, they'd started piecing it together. Quietly, Declan didn't face prison, or handcuffs, or headlines. Just something worse for a man like him. The slow erosion of credibility. And I didn't need to watch it happen. I texted Harper. "Thank you, I'm good now, really." She responded with a simple heart emoji. No words, no questions. That was enough. I logged out of my email and shut the laptop. Later that evening, as the light faded into something softer, I pulled a small frame from one of the boxes. It held a photo from a trip to Santa Fe. Just me, from a time before Declan, sitting on a stone wall, laughing at something the camera didn't catch. I placed it on the bookshelf, dead center. Not because I missed the person I was, but because I wanted to remember she still existed. I've stopped measuring my worth in how well I endure. I don't need my story to be impressive. Just honest. This wasn't a revenge arc, it was reclamation. Not every story ends with a standing ovation. Some just end with peace. A quiet apartment, a clean start. And maybe that's the real victory. I used to think silence was something passive, that if you didn't scream, if you didn't make a scene, you were weak, an easy target. But now I know better. Silence, when chosen, is a form of strength. It's where clarity begins. It's where self-respect speaks the loudest. What I went through wasn't just about a failed marriage. It was about remembering that I was never meant to be erased from my own life. It was about reclaiming my voice, quietly, deliberately, and on my own terms. If you're watching this and you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or pushed out of something you helped build, let me tell you this. You are not invisible. You are not crazy. And you are never too late to take your power back. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who finally stopped hoping he would change and started believing that I could. What about you? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like someone was writing you out of your own story? What did you do? Or maybe, what do you wish you had done differently? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. If this video hit home for you, press 1 in the comments or tell me how you connected with it. And if it didn't resonate, that's okay too. Tell me why. This is a space for honesty, not perfection. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, real, raw, and deeply human, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on that bell icon so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight back, it's to walk away without ever looking over your shoulder. Hi, my name's Venora. 3 days in the kitchen, 19 place settings, hand-rolled napkins tied with twine, I braided myself. And then, one message. Change of plans, restaurant, adults only. No explanation, no apology. Just like that, I was cut out. From dinner, from decisions, from the will. But what would you do if your own family erased you with a group text? Because I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just pressed send. And a week later, they called 98 times. Would you have answered? The light in the kitchen was soft, just the way I liked it in the late afternoon. I'd cracked the window above the sink to let in a whisper of spring air, mixing with the scent of cinnamon and roasted garlic. The playlist I'd made just for the occasion, Sam Cooke, Aretha, and a little Carole King, played faintly from my phone speaker while I smoothed out the last pie crust. I wasn't rushing anymore. The hard part was done. I'd been cooking for 3 straight days, chopping, braising, kneading, seasoning. My hands were raw in places from peeling potatoes and scrubbing pans, but I didn't mind. It was my mother's 70th birthday, and I'd volunteered to host the dinner at my house this year. 18 people, possibly 19 if Aunt Thelma didn't bail last minute. I'd printed custom place cards with gold foil names, arranged fresh garden roses in the center of the table, and even cleaned the baseboards, which no one would notice but me. But still, it mattered. My father loved brisket. Delphine, my older sister, always asked for lemon asparagus. And Mom? She adored peach cobbler more than any dessert on earth. As I placed the cobbler into the oven, I felt a rare sense of hope fluttering under my ribs. Maybe this year, maybe they'd see it. The effort, the care. Maybe someone would say something like, "We couldn't have done this without you." Even a small thanks would have been enough. The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me out of that brief fantasy. I wiped my hands on the apron and picked it up from the counter. It was a group text from Delphine. Change of plans, restaurant, adults only. No greeting, no context, just a single clipped sentence. No one else replied, not even Mom. I stared at the screen, the message hanging there like a slap in the middle of my kitchen. Flour clung to the sides of my fingers as I held the phone. They weren't just changing the plan, they were cutting me out. The cobbler timer beeped behind me. I didn't move. I just kept staring, the words replaying in my head over and over. Adults only. I wasn't even worth a second sentence. I glanced back at the dining table I'd spent the morning setting. Every plate aligned, every napkin ironed and folded into a soft triangle. Candles stood unlit. There was no need now. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, and I typed, "Should I still finish setting the table?" 3 dots. Someone read it. Then nothing. I deleted the message. I didn't cry. Not right away. I went back to the stove and stirred the mashed potatoes I'd already finished hours ago. The scent of butter and garlic was still warm, but now it was all for nothing. "This isn't the first time they've erased me," I said aloud, my voice low. Just the first time they didn't pretend to hide it. Years of memories flicked across my mind. Me setting up chairs at birthday parties, staying late to clean after family dinners, always behind the scenes, but never once included in the photos. I thought this year might be different. I really believed that. I turned off the oven and gently set the peach cobbler on the counter. Its golden crust was perfect. Mom would have loved it. Would have. I walked to the sink, wiped my hands slowly with a towel, and looked around the empty kitchen. The house was so quiet now, like it was holding its breath with me. They didn't forget me, I whispered. They removed me. I turned toward the hallway, untied the apron from my waist, and folded it neatly over the back of a chair. Okay then. I stood there for a long time after whispering those words. The oven had cooled. The candles I'd planned to light were still tucked in the drawer next to the matches I wouldn't need. I moved without really feeling my limbs, like muscle memory had taken over. I folded the apron, straightened a napkin corner on the table, checked the timer that no longer mattered, and then I sat down. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't know what else to do. The phone was still in my hand. I opened the group chat again, the message staring back at me like a dare. Change of plans, restaurant, adults only. No follow-up, no sorry, not even one of those thumbs-up emojis they usually toss around like candy. I tapped the screen and typed, "Should I keep everything warm?" And then I watched. One by one, the dots popped up. Delphine, Mom, Gavin, all red, all blue, all blank after that. I didn't even feel hurt in the usual way, just this strange fog, like I was being smothered under something invisible. I locked the phone and let it drop to the table. It's not that they didn't care. It's that I trained them not to have to. For years, I showed up, filled the gaps, made sure no one felt awkward or empty-handed. I covered when Delphine forgot to bring side dishes, when Gavin was late picking up Mom. I was the just let her handle it person. And I had handled it. Right up to the moment they decided I wasn't necessary anymore. Memories trickled in. Birthday parties where I stayed back in the kitchen. Christmas mornings when I took all the group photos but was never in them. Even the PTA banquet, where I arranged the decorations and still ate standing by the punch table while they sat at the head with nameplates. People call you the glue, like it's a compliment. I used to believe it was. But glue doesn't get framed. It gets scraped off when it shows. I had just stood up to start putting the food away when my phone buzzed again. A neighbor, Leona from 2 houses down, had sent me a link to a Facebook Live. Her message read, "Thought this was weird since you weren't with them?" I clicked it. There they were, my family. The table at Barrow's Seafood was long, the room softly lit with twinkle lights and helium balloons hovering near the ceiling. There was laughter, wine glasses raised, my uncle clapping Gavin on the back. A banner behind them read, "Happy 70th, Mom!" Delphine stood to make a toast. She held a glass, no doubt with the cheap Prosecco she always insisted was just as good as the expensive stuff. And what caught my eye was what was in her other hand. A folded place card. The design looked eerily familiar, gold calligraphy with pressed fern leaves. I'd made those. I'd hand-cut them, glued the details. So she'd taken my work, just not me. I sat back down, now shaking. I covered the mashed potatoes with foil. The cobbler too, though the crust had started to go soft. I poured myself a glass of water and spooned a small portion of food onto a plate. I ate in silence. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of being left out of something I helped build. This was supposed to be the one time I didn't end up serving myself, I murmured. I didn't let myself cry. Not yet. I knew if I started, I might not stop. After finishing the meal, barely tasting it, I washed the dishes. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't sit in that kitchen and look at what was supposed to be anymore. I grabbed my phone and opened the group chat one last time. My thumb hovered. Then, with a steady breath, I hit Leave Group. Let them figure it out next time. Let someone else remember the napkins or the damn sweet potatoes. I stared at the screen for a beat before whispering the thought that had haunted me since the text came in. Maybe it's not about being forgotten. Maybe it's about being erased. I didn't sleep. Not really. I dozed off for a bit just before sunrise, but the kind of sleep that doesn't rest anything. When I got out of bed, the kitchen still smelled faintly like warm sugar and rosemary. Not comforting, just stale. A ghost of what could have been. I moved like I was on autopilot, rinsing a plate that hadn't been used, folding the napkins that never touched anyone's lap. Some messes don't belong in the sink. They're on people's hands. I opened my laptop on the counter, not because I needed to work, but because I didn't know what else to do. I clicked into my email out of habit, and there it was. Subject line: Update, Family Legacy Fund Beneficiary Structure. Sender: Arliss Rudd, Esco. I didn't even open it right away. I stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked long enough. Then I clicked. The language was cold, efficient, legal. Effective immediately, your name will no longer be included in the primary beneficiary allocation list as approved by the voting committee. No greeting, no explanation, no courtesy call, just one digital gut punch. I stood there, reading it again and again, expecting something to shift in me. But all I felt was the air in the room becoming heavy, like everything was pressing down on me at once. I hovered over the reply button. My fingers clenched slightly, but I didn't write back. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask for reconsideration. I just closed the tab. Because if I said anything, it would be me trying to negotiate my own worth again, and I was done doing that. They'd drawn a line in the sand. Quietly, legally, permanently, and they didn't even bother to tell me in person. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down the oldest binder on the top row, Initial Framework, Q1 Phase Launch. I flipped through the tabs: budgeting models, operating procedures, email templates, all mine. Hours of unpaid work, countless calls after my day job. I remember running mock board meetings in my garage, using paint stirrers as name placards. I thought family meant something different. I thought contribution was its own form of membership. But apparently, legacy only counts when it fits the version they're willing to frame. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. I played it. Mom's voice came through with that forced gentleness she used when she wanted to deflect instead of confront. Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. I know you probably saw the fund update. We'll talk soon, okay? Delphine says you're a little emotional right now, and maybe it's best to let things breathe. Just take a walk, get some air. Love you. I let it play twice, not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to make sure I wasn't imagining the tone, the way she didn't ask how I felt, just told me what to do. The way she didn't say it was wrong, only that I was overreacting. Delphine says you're emotional. Of course she does. They always package dismissal in concern. She's tired. She's overwhelmed. She's sensitive. That's how they neuter truth, by calling it a mood. I put the phone down. Then I opened a blank email window. 2. BoardOLegacyFundTrust.com. No subject line yet. No draft. Just that one line blinking back at me, like it was daring me to write something that would finally draw my own damn line. I didn't send the email. Not yet. I stared at the blinking cursor, like it owed me something. The screen glared back with that harsh, flat light. Cold, clinical. Just like the message Arliss had sent hours ago. No call, no warning. Just a sterile notification that I'd been written out. The afternoon dragged. I stepped away from my laptop, not because I was finished, but because I couldn't stare at that white space anymore without feeling like I was drowning in it. I grabbed my phone, not looking for anything in particular. Maybe a headline to distract me, maybe a recipe I wouldn't cook. What I found instead was a voice memo, forwarded from my cousin Carla. No context, just a 3-minute clip. I pressed play, and the audio crackled to life. It was my Aunt Sheila's voice. That girl? She's sweet, but she's just kitchen help, really. Laughter followed. Soft, comfortable, familiar. Delphine's voice chimed in after a pause. She always volunteers. That's what makes it easier. They said it like I wasn't family, like I was the woman who came in to refill glasses and disappear before dessert. They didn't know they were being recorded. And no one, not one person, paused, corrected, or defended me. I sat down at the kitchen table slowly. My hands were shaking, not from rage, but recognition. This wasn't new. My name had been left off emails more times than I could count. I'd been forgotten from the gala program 3 years ago, even though I'd designed the damn thing. When people exclude you consistently, it's no longer oversight. It's intent. I read that somewhere once. It stuck because I didn't want to believe it could be true in my own family. But here it was. Intent. Proof of it, in their voices. I opened my browser again. Out of habit, I clicked the Legacy Fund website. It had been redesigned recently. Delphine made a big deal about it. More modern, more professional. That was her phrase. Scrolling through the Our History section, a banner image caught my eye. Gala night, 8 years ago. I remembered that night vividly. I wore a blue dress with a neckline that made Mom frown, and I stood on the far end of the lineup for the board photo. But in the image on the website, I wasn't there. The picture had been cropped. I closed the site and opened my phone's gallery, swiped until I found the photo from that night. There I was, on the end, half turned toward the photographer, mid-laugh. You couldn't miss me. But on the official version, the one that mattered, I had been snipped clean. It hit like a quiet internal bruise. One that didn't show, but ached just the same. They didn't just forget me, I said aloud. They curated around me. The fund had been built on my unpaid hours. I made the structure, the systems, the documents they still used were based on frameworks I developed sitting at this same kitchen table, coffee gone cold at midnight. But none of that was in the brochures. No one gave a speech about invisible scaffolding. I closed the photo app and opened my notes folder, dragged every legacy-related document into a new directory, and began tagging them. Year, task, owner. No anger, no rush, just precision. I wasn't organizing out of spite. This wasn't for revenge, it was for construction. If they wouldn't give me a seat at the table, I'd build another one, with room for everyone who'd ever been erased like I had. I whispered it, not to anyone in particular, just to the space around me. If you're not in the picture, were you ever really there? I opened a clean spreadsheet, labeled it Structure, Original, and typed the first line of data. This time, it would be recorded. Not for credit. For truth. The file name stopped me. Legacy Fund, Originals, sent from a burner Gmail account I didn't recognize. No body text, no subject line beyond the title. Just a ping from my phone that cracked the silence of the kitchen. I clicked, and I froze. Inside were PDFs I hadn't seen in years. Some I didn't even know had been saved. Early spreadsheets, draft proposals, my old budget templates with handwritten notations in the margins, my handwriting, emails with timestamps, attachments I'd long assumed had disappeared into the family's convenient black hole of revisionist history. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. But my shoulders dropped, just slightly. This wasn't vindication. Not yet. But it was weight, real, tangible weight I could now put on the other side of the scale. Later that evening, I cleared the dining table. Not for guests, not for family, for truth. I set out a manila folder labeled Legacy Archive and began to pull from drawers, old file boxes, saved thumb drives, receipts, screenshots, a PayPal transfer for $12,000 dated 5 years ago, money I'd sent to Delphine when she'd called me crying about needing to pivot the fund's structure. She had said it was temporary, said she'd pay me back, said it was just family. Attached to the receipt was a photo of a handwritten card. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only one who never asks me to explain. D. The same Delphine who just last week appeared in the fund's glossy newsletter, arms crossed, standing in front of the foundation's new office expansion with a caption that read, Delphine Krantz, our founder, took a leap of faith by funding the early seed round from her own savings, a testament to bold leadership. I stared at the card. Then at the receipt. Then back at the caption. I didn't need the spotlight. I never had. But I needed the truth not to be erased and repackaged into someone else's resume. I thought about how I got that money in the first place, selling my car, my Honda Accord. It wasn't glamorous, but it ran, and I sold it for less than it was worth to a neighbor who knew I was in a hurry. For her. I remembered the phone call. I promise I'll make it right, V. You're saving me, just until this thing turns around. It did turn around, and she walked away, holding the credit, while I stood in the shadows, carrying the cost. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, Fund Timeline Reality. I started logging the hours, every file I built, every call I joined, every weekend I missed. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it like I was sweeping a floor before building something new. I remembered a quote my mentor once told me. You don't need to burn bridges. Just refuse to rebuild them with your own wood. I wasn't going to light anything on fire. Not yet. But I wasn't picking up a hammer for their house anymore either. The manila folder was full now. I left it open. I wasn't done, but I didn't feel rushed. I was playing a longer game now. I picked up my phone and hovered over Arliss's name. I didn't call. I didn't need to. They already knew what they'd done. You don't show them you know, I murmured. You let them show you what they think you've forgotten. Just then, a new notification buzzed on my phone. Google Drive, new folder shared. From unknown, title, Legacy Fund, Originals. I opened it again, this time slower, and there it was, something I hadn't seen since the beginning. A scanned cover page, Initial Operating Agreement. Contributors, Venora Ellis, Delphine Krantz, Gavin Boone. My name, first. The words were still there. I remember everything. I didn't save the draft, didn't even add a subject line, but those 3 words on the screen had already stirred something in me I couldn't unfeel. So instead of hitting send, I closed the laptop, made myself a cup of tea I wouldn't finish, and walked away from the desk. I needed air, but not outside. I needed to breathe where the silence had lived longest, inside that folder, the anonymous one. I opened it again from my phone while standing in the doorway of the living room, the floor still scattered with old notes and unopened holiday cards. The folder hadn't vanished. If anything, it seemed more real than ever. The first file I tapped was named Venora A Process Flow .xlxx, and there it was. My format, my naming convention, my tab colors, my sequence of steps labeled in my voice. I knew that spreadsheet like I knew the lines in my own palm. I didn't leak this, but someone out there knew what they'd taken from me and wanted me to know they remembered. I printed it. One by one, I began organizing every document in my own archive. I labeled each file by year, project, task, cross-referenced against emails, texts, scraps I'd written on sticky notes, and the backs of bank envelopes. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post. I didn't even vent to the dog across the street, who usually barked through the fence whenever I walked past. Instead, I started a personal ledger titled Legacy Truth Log. It began simple. 2016. Created budget model from scratch after Delphine's consultant quit. 2017. Donated personal funds to print first marketing materials. 2018. Drafted pitch deck for local sponsorship outreach. This isn't revenge, I told myself. It's record keeping. It's time the story stopped being one-sided. Every hour I hadn't been paid for, every detail they'd presented as visionary that I had quietly built with no credit. I logged it all. Just as I was about to log off for the night, a message popped up on LinkedIn. Jessa Hathaway, my college roommate, now CFO at a mid-sized firm in Atlanta. Hey, it started. I was browsing Legacy Fund's new site. Didn't I see your name on the founding committee years ago? It's not there now. I blinked, then typed, Not anymore. They edited it out. Her reply came fast. That's ridiculous. You still have the email from when they asked for help? That's enough to burn a house down. I paused, rereading her words twice. I did have that email, the one from Delphine begging me to help fix the budget, saying she was drowning and needed someone who could clean up the mess without making it worse. It wasn't about revenge, but it was starting to feel a lot like readiness. I created a new private folder. Proof. Not for now, but soon. Then I added Jessa to it. She didn't ask for access. I gave it anyway. I reread our short exchange, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not validation, not hope exactly, but a shift. I didn't even ask her. She saw it herself, which means others will too. I opened my laptop again, more slowly this time, created a blank document. Title, To the Board, Draft, Not Sent. The cursor blinked in silence. I didn't save it. I didn't have to, because I already knew the opening line. I remember everything. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened the email draft, attached the documents, no frills, no explanations, and clicked Send. I didn't sign it, didn't need to. I didn't name names either, just attached what was already theirs, meeting minutes, early drafts, scanned memos with my initials still faintly visible, screenshots of proposal emails they thought were forgotten. A clean, concise timeline. The final line read, "Please review with integrity. You know who this is about." Then I closed the laptop and exhaled like I'd just stepped out of water. It didn't feel victorious. It felt still. My phone was quiet for about 20 minutes, and then the read receipts started pinging one after the other. Arliss first, then Rebecca from the finance board, then that always silent man from legal, David something, who hadn't said 5 words to me in 3 years. I didn't refresh obsessively, just sat there, sipping a now cold cup of coffee, and watching the board start to twitch. No replies, no questions. But that didn't mean they weren't reacting. I'd learned long ago that silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means the meeting is happening somewhere I'm not invited. By mid-afternoon, 2 of the PDFs had been forwarded twice, one from a private Gmail to a board-linked domain, another directly to external counsel. They were scrambling. I could feel it without hearing a word. Later that night, I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but because the power flickered in the storm rolling through Charleston, and maybe, deep down, part of me liked the metaphor. Then it happened. My phone buzzed again. Leona, my neighbor 2 houses down, sent me a link to a blog post. Concerns raised over transparency in local family fund. No names, no accusations, but every line screamed truth. Phrases lifted directly from my documents. References to early operational contributions from uncredited sources. They even quoted one of my original project outlines word for word. I didn't leak it, but someone had. And I knew exactly what that meant. Someone on the inside wasn't playing by their script anymore. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't screenshot it, didn't forward it, didn't comment or like or share, just read. And read again. It didn't feel like I thought it would. It didn't feel like payback. It felt like something I'd been dragging behind me for years had finally slipped off my shoulders. The kind of exhaustion that comes from holding a truth too long, finally releasing. Not relief, just air. Clean, full air. I turned off my phone, and for the first time in weeks, I let my shoulders fall, let my face soften, let myself breathe. At 2:03 in the morning, the screen lit up again. A message from the name I hadn't seen pop up in days. Delphine, just one word. Why? Now they're doing what they never did before, taking me seriously. That thought drifted through my mind as I sat up in bed, the sun just beginning to crawl through the cracks of the curtains. My phone was on the nightstand, buzzing before I even reached for it. When I finally unlocked the screen, I had to blink twice to register the number. 98 missed calls, 17 voicemails, Mom, Gavin, Arliss. And of course, Delphine. Her name scattered through the call log like confetti at a party I wasn't invited to. None of them said, "Are you okay?" in their messages. They said things like, "You've made this a mess. Call me back, now." What the hell were you thinking, Venora? I sipped coffee while playing one voicemail from Gavin on speaker. His voice was lower than usual, measured. I could tell he was reading from something. This isn't about truth or fairness. It's about timing and image. You've jeopardized both. I set the phone down, not out of rage, but because I'd heard enough. Amazing how loud people get when silence finally breaks their script. By noon, I'd already walked the length of the block twice, just to stay ahead of the ringing. I needed to be moving, even if I didn't know toward what. That's when the FaceTime came through. Delphine. I stared at the screen a beat too long. Then I hit accept. Her face appeared, framed in sunlight and smudged mascara. She was dressed for optics, crisp white blouse, blazer barely wrinkled, earrings that looked intentionally understated. She didn't wait. You embarrassed us. Her voice cracked. I don't even know what you sent. She paused for dramatic effect, and when I didn't jump in, she blinked fast and kept going. Mom's upset. You know how fragile she's been since the foundation's restructure. And Gavin's deal with that coastal project. He said the timing couldn't be worse. I let her go on. Every word sounded rehearsed. She was crying, yes, but not because she was sorry. It wasn't guilt. It was fallout. They cry about the fire, but not about the match they struck. She waited for me to say something. Anything. I kept my tone calm. I sent the truth. If it damaged something, maybe it wasn't that stable to begin with. There was a beat of silence. Then she ended the call without another word. I didn't save the video, but I screenshotted the call log. Something about it felt significant. Maybe not now, but someday. I sat on the front steps with a notebook I hadn't opened in months. I'd written something in it years ago during a retreat someone at the fund sent me to, the kind with overpriced speakers and catered boxed lunches. One quote was underlined, twice. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I whispered it now, like a prayer. I didn't blow up the house, I said. I just stopped holding up the walls. And just like that, the guilt slipped off like an old coat. It didn't fit anymore. For dinner, I made something simple. Rice, steamed greens, salmon baked in foil. I ate alone, not in sadness, but in silence that was mine. Not silence given to me by omission, but one I chose. At 9:47 p.m., just as I was rinsing the plate, my phone buzzed again. A text from Arliss. Board is requesting a closed session, details forthcoming. No greeting, no context. No, hope you're well. Just procedural. But I smiled. Now they're doing what they never did before, taking me seriously. The agenda email came just after 5 p.m., right as I was walking past the park where Dad used to play chess on Sundays. I opened it standing beside the iron fence, the late sun slicing through branches and warming my hands, even as the screen stared back coldly. Final agenda attached for tomorrow's closed board session. I scrolled. My name wasn't under attendees. It was under subjects of concern. I exhaled. Good. That means they're finally spelling it out loud. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with my laptop open and my fingers resting lightly on the keys. Not typing, just waiting. I didn't need to send anything tonight. I'd already made my move. A message popped up in my inbox. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. That voice in the email, it was yours, wasn't it? Thank you for finally saying it. I didn't write back. They used to look through me. Now they look for me. And that, right there, was the shift. This wasn't someone asking me to fix something or smooth something over or keep the peace for the family. It was gratitude, nothing attached, no follow-up favor, no damage control. It didn't last long, peace never does, but it was real. A few hours later, an email blast came through from the Legacy Fund. A shiny new digital brochure. A decade of impact, polished graphics, pull quotes, stylized headshots. Curiosity got the best of me. I clicked. Founding contributors: Delphine Krantz, Gavin Boone, Rachel Sellers, Junior Associate. No mention of me. I stared for a while at Delphine's photo. Her arms crossed in that way she thinks signals power. her smile just short of sincere. I remembered a draft version of that same brochure buried in my old inbox. I searched for it, found it under a label I hadn't touched in years. Fund. Original materials. There it was. Same layout, same headline. But in that version, my name was listed. Venora Ellis, Founding Operations Lead. Edited out. History is edited by those who need to look better in it. I whispered the words, then hit save on the PDF and renamed it Legacy Revision Proof.pdf. I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I scribbled a note on a post-it and stuck it to the corner of my screen. Let them publish. That'll make the correction official. The next morning, I took a walk. Nothing dramatic. Just 10 blocks down King Street, past the cafe I used to meet donors at, past the bookstore Delphine said was too local to partner with. I paused across the street from the Legacy Fund's office building. Through the glass windows, I could see them. Delphine pacing with her headset on, Gavin hunched over a laptop, Arliss standing near the coffee station, pretending not to watch either one. They looked busy. They looked concerned. They still didn't know where the storm was coming from, because it wasn't outside the building. It was under their foundation. I smiled. Then I walked back to my car, not hurrying, not hiding, just moving the way people do when they've stopped asking for permission. My phone buzzed. One last email before the day closed. Reminder, closed board session, 10 a.m. Deliberation on legacy impact. No instructions, just my name, in bold, not as a participant, as the reason they were meeting. You may want to prepare a statement. That line from Arliss sat at the top of my inbox, unopened for 2 hours before I finally clicked. There was no attachment, no additional note, just that single sentence like a match tossed casually near dry timber. I didn't panic, didn't pace. I made coffee slowly, like it was any other morning. The kind of slow that came with intention, not avoidance. By the time the sun peeked through the blinds, I'd already stacked the evidence, printed copies of emails, timeline breakdowns, a backup USB. The manila folders were labeled by year and sealed with blue painter's tape. I wasn't going to hand them over, but I needed to see them, touch them, remember what they stood for. They'd scheduled the board session for 10 a.m., tucked inside the Legacy Fund's downtown building, glass walls, polished concrete floors, the usual performance of transparency. At 9:15, I received the official confirmation. You're not required to attend today's session. Not required, not invited, not welcome. I smiled. I didn't need to be in the room. I'd already furnished it with everything they couldn't ignore. I opened my email again and clicked forward on a packet titled Legacy Record. Full summary. No commentary, no subject line. I sent it directly to someone I knew wouldn't look the other way. Anita Laird, an external advisor who didn't owe the Krantz name anything. She and I hadn't spoken in over a year, but she once told me, "You were the only one who asked for process before results." I attached the files, hit send. Then I got in my car and parked outside the building, not to protest, not to be seen, just to be present. At 9:42, I saw Gavin walk in, adjusting his blazer and talking too fast into his Bluetooth headset. Arliss arrived next, hair tighter than usual, heels faster than they needed to be. Delphine came last, alone, clutching her tote like it carried more than documents. Maybe regret? I didn't move, just watched them pass through the glass. Sometimes being absent is the loudest presence. At 10:23, my phone vibrated. A message from a number not saved in my contacts, but I knew who it was. One of the junior auditors I trained years ago. Someone who'd never had a seat at the table either. They asked about your early roles, the message read. I told them the truth. Hope that's okay. I stared at the screen before replying. It's not just okay, I typed. It's overdue. Another ping came through. A forwarded scan. My original project proposal, signed in ink, with my name printed across the top in bold font. Venora Ellis, lead strategy consultant. 8 years ago, Buried ever since. I exhaled hard, then saved the file and backed it up 3 times. By noon, I was halfway through a walk along the Battery, cool breeze curling past my sleeves. I didn't rush, didn't refresh. I'd already moved past the need to chase the outcome. When you stop trying to get in their room, you remember you already built your own. At 6:02 p.m., just as I sat down to eat dinner, chili from the slow cooker still steaming, I saw the encrypted email from Arliss. Subject line, RE. Role clarification, internal use only. There was no attachment, just a single line of text. You may want to prepare a statement. They want clarity? They better bring a flashlight. I whispered it into the dark as I powered down my phone and set it face down on the windowsill. The glow of the screen lingered in my eyes for a moment longer than I wanted it to. But the quiet? That stayed with me. In the morning, I made tea. No calls, no texts. The kind of silence I had once begged for. Now, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like prep. The first voicemail arrived at 10:12 a.m., Grandma Mildred. "Sweetheart," she began, breath shallow, voice coated in concern that felt borrowed. "I don't agree with how they've handled things, but maybe let it be. Please, you've made your point." Click. "No, I'm proud of you. No, I believe you." Just a polite plea to return to quiet compliance. I replayed it. Once. Twice. Not to hear her words, but to catch what she didn't say. She knew I was erased. She just didn't want to risk her seat at their table. She never did. And yet, I loved her for it. Quietly. The kind of love that recognizes frailty and forgives it, even when it burns. Later that day, I got tagged in a Facebook post from an old colleague I hadn't spoken to since we worked on the 2016 gala together. I clicked through. The headline stopped me cold. She was cut from the picture, but she built the frame. It was published on a local blog known for community spotlights and exposés. The article was unsigned, but I didn't need a byline to know who'd written it. It quoted phrases pulled directly from my draft email. Legacy doesn't begin with who's listed first. Silence is a transaction we're taught to make quietly. No one from the family had commented. Not publicly, but the absence of denial was its own kind of confession. And the silence? It was louder than rage. I walked through the hallway in my house, the one lined with frames. Photos from birthdays, baptisms, holidays where I had done the cooking, the organizing, the cleaning. In most of them, I was either blurred in the background or holding the camera. They never wanted me gone, just invisible, quiet, useful, like a serving tray that got passed around without acknowledgement, but was always expected to be clean and steady. A message popped up from Lisa, an old coworker. "That article? That was you, right?" Then another from Aaron, who used to intern under me before getting poached by Gavin. About time someone told the truth. I didn't confirm, didn't deny. Just typed back. Truth doesn't need a name when it's obvious. I let them draw their own lines. Mine had already been inked. And then, just as I was about to set my phone down for good, another notification arrived. A group message from Mom. "We are having a family-only dinner Sunday night. No drama, just clarity." Clarity, as if it was something they could bake and serve over mashed potatoes. I read it 3 times. Didn't respond. Just turned off the phone again and stared out the window. "They want clarity?" I said, almost amused. "They better bring a flashlight. I think we should build something together." May's message was still glowing on my screen when I pulled into Delphine's driveway that Sunday evening. Her porch lights were on. Her lawn looked clipped by laser. Inside, I could already see movement, shadows shifting behind gauzy curtains. I parked across the street, engine idling longer than it needed to. By the time I stepped through the front door, they were all already seated. Of course they were. The table looked like a spread straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Linen napkins folded into swans, crystal glasses, flowers too symmetrical to be real. For a second, I almost admired it. It looked perfect, I thought, like everything in this family always did. Until you asked who paid for the silver. Mom greeted me with a kiss that barely brushed my cheek. Gavin nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. Delphine waved me toward the only empty seat left, conveniently at the far end. Dinner began like a well-rehearsed play. Vacation plans, vague fundraiser talk, a couple jokes about Gavin's golf swing. It wasn't until the plates were being cleared and dessert hovered nearby that Delphine stood up with a glass in her hand. "I'd like to clear the air a little," she said, as if that were a generous offer. She didn't mention names. Not mine, not hers. Just a polished monologue of implication. "We've all made mistakes," she started. "But some things should have stayed within the family. We've had to manage a lot lately," I cut in. "Some people, or me?" I asked, my voice level. "Because I came here hoping for a conversation. What I walked into was a performance." She blinked, lips parting just slightly. Mom tensed across the table. Gavin glanced at his watch, like it might give him an excuse to leave. Delphine smiled, tight, rehearsed. "There's no need to get dramatic, Venora." I put my fork down. "Dramatic? No," I said. "Documented? Yes." Before anyone could respond, my phone buzzed against the wood of the table. I didn't plan to check it, but something in me did anyway. A new email. Subject line: "I read your story. Thank you." From May Simmons. She and I hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since she'd stepped down from her own nonprofit after a brutal legal fight with her ex-husband, the kind of fight that buries a woman's name even when she wins. The message read, "They erased me from the company I built, but your words reminded me that being unseen doesn't mean being powerless. If you ever build something new, I'd like to help." I looked up at the table. They were still talking about my tone, still dissecting how uncomfortable I made them feel. They didn't know my voice had already outgrown that room. I folded the napkin beside my plate, stood up slowly. "I won't fight to stay somewhere I was never invited to in the first place," I said, steady. Mom opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. I turned and walked toward the door. No plates dropped, no chairs scraped in protest. As I reached the foyer, a soft voice followed me. "Aunt V?" It was my niece, Rachel, barely 12, big eyes, even bigger questions. "Are you okay?" I turned just enough to meet her gaze. "I'm finally becoming someone I can't lose," I told her. Then I opened the door, stepped into the night, and let it close behind me. On the drive home, the streetlights blurred across the windshield. The road was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't suffocate, but clears. And then my phone pinged again. May. "I think we should build something together." "That's nice. But I've already built my own table." The words hadn't left my mouth. They didn't need to. I said them into the quiet of my kitchen, into the space where I used to wonder how to get back in. Now I just wondered why I ever waited for a door to open that was bolted from the inside. 3 days had passed since the dinner, since Rachel's small voice asked if I was okay, since my mother's face tensed when I refused to fold neatly into their choreography. The house had stayed quiet. Too quiet. Until the call came. Rowena Voss. I hadn't heard her voice in years. She was one of the fund's earliest external board members, old school, dry as parchment, the type of woman who could sniff out vanity under a silk scarf. She never spoke unless she was prepared to burn something down with just a sentence. And that's exactly what she did. "I've seen enough," she said without greeting. "I'm initiating a review of all founding documentation." I paused, not because I was surprised, but because something in my chest finally uncoiled. She didn't wait for me to speak, just hung up. Power doesn't always speak first. But when it moves, the room shifts. That same afternoon, I received 2 emails forwarded to me anonymously. The first was from a junior associate, someone I trained when I was still foolish enough to believe effort guaranteed respect. "We're concerned about inconsistencies in the fund's founding narrative." The second email hit harder. It contained scans of my original logo sketches, my timelines, even a personal email I'd sent to Delphine outlining our first-year strategy. I'd found those designs once on a boardroom slide, credited to a consulting firm that had never existed. They thought silence would erase the roots. They forgot roots grow underground. I didn't reply to the memos. I didn't leak them. I just saved them in a folder labeled Undeniable. The next morning, I heard about the emergency board meeting from a friend on the periphery, someone who'd seen the Zoom invite list float through Slack like a secret someone forgot to secure. Review of founding roles. Clarification meeting closed. I wasn't invited. Of course not. But every room they lock becomes one I outgrow. Midday, another message arrived, this time from Arliss. Attached. The role clarification memo, draft V2. I opened it slowly, no rush in my body, no shaking in my hands. It was just text, just bullet points. And there it was. Initial contributor and founding operations lead, Venora Ellis. It wasn't bolded. It wasn't at the top. But it was there. For the first time in years, it was there. I ran my finger across the screen, as if the paper could feel me tracing back what they tried to bury. It's not a trophy, it's a record. Later that day, I stepped outside and stood beneath the old oak tree in my yard, the one my father planted before I was born. Its roots had cracked the concrete sidewalk over time, not quickly, not loudly, but with certainty. They kept thinking I was trying to come back, but I never was. I was trying to move forward, without dragging them with me. That evening, another email arrived, this time with a header soaked in politeness. We'd like to formally welcome you to next month's Leadership Summit. Seat 2B is reserved. I read it twice. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed once. Soft, full, final. That's nice, I said aloud, but I've already built my own table, and now it begins. May's message echoed in my mind as I sat on the porch steps the next morning, coffee cooling fast in my hands. A week had passed since the leadership memo had gone public, since my name was printed, for the first time, as a founding operations lead. Not an asterisk, not a whispered nod. A line, in writing. I hadn't spoken. I didn't need to. The Legacy Fund released a statement 2 days later, carefully phrased, legally brushed clean. Something about internal review and clarification of organizational roles. No names, no direct apologies. But anyone paying attention knew. A reporter from the Courier called, asking if I'd be willing to comment. I said no. Let them perform their cleanup. I'm not stepping into their spin cycle. I wasn't looking to be their counterpoint in a press war. They were crumbling on their own. By Wednesday, a small watchdog site, one that didn't depend on donor ads, published a story titled Silent Builders: How Legacy Fund's Origins Were Reshaped. It was everything I had feared and everything I had hoped. Quotes from internal staff, screenshots of early drafts I recognized immediately, a scanned logo sketch with my handwriting visible. They printed it without fanfare, but the facts stood taller than any headline. My name wasn't the center of the story, but it was the weight behind it. Public reaction was mixed. Some loyalists called it a smear. Others commented things like, finally, we knew something was off. This explains why Gavin never answered our emails. Inside the walls, though, it was different. I could tell. Gavin called me that evening, first time in almost 4 years. His voice was measured, like a man talking to a ticking clock. Let's find a way to contain this, he said. Quietly. I think we can agree the optics aren't good for anyone. I let the silence sit between us like a third voice. Then I said, you should have thought about that before you rewrote the credits. He hung up without another word. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. It wasn't just the lies. It was the comfort they had while telling them. I remembered something an old professor once said when someone asked about power. Power isn't loud. It's who decides what gets remembered. And now, the remembering was out of their hands. Later that week, an email came through from the organizers of a women's entrepreneurship conference in Atlanta. Subject line: Foundations that don't break, invitation to speak. I stared at the screen. I didn't go looking for a platform. I became one. That night, I reopened my notebook. The one where I used to track meeting notes and grocery lists. The back pages had always been reserved for thoughts I didn't know what to do with. Now they read like blueprints. And then, as if the universe was winking, another message landed in my inbox. A name I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple: If you ever need someone. I clicked. I was there. I saw what they did. I never said anything because I thought I'd lose everything. But I'm ready now. If you ever need someone to speak, I will. I read it twice, closed my eyes, and whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the air that had always been too still. And now it begins. The next morning, I opened the audit summary in my inbox and stared at the PDF before clicking. I didn't need to rush. It wasn't like I hadn't already lived every line of it. But there was something about seeing it there, formalized and official, that made me take a breath. Page 4. Initial contributor and founding operations lead, Venora Ellis. Not bold, not underlined. But there. It took a paper trail to be seen. But I was never invisible, just inconvenient. Within 48 hours, 3 board members submitted their resignations. No public spectacle, no press conferences, just quiet exits from people who realized they'd stood still for too long beside something crooked. Delphine released a carefully worded statement, stepping back to focus on family, as if the timing were just coincidence. Gavin, predictably, issued a formal apology. But it wasn't to me, it was to the fund. They apologized to preserve image, I thought, not to restore integrity. Later that week, I received an offer, a seat on the restructured board, a warm welcome, a second chance, an olive branch wrapped in PR strategy. I declined with one line. I no longer need a title to validate the work I've already done. I remembered something my old mentor once told me. Don't build to be recognized. Build so it stands without your name on it. And I had. Quietly, steadily. When I visited a local college the following Thursday to speak at their seminar on whistleblowing and gendered erasure, I wasn't prepared for how many young faces were in the room. Students, staff, women with notebooks and questions that sounded a little too familiar. One of them stood up and asked, "How did you stay quiet for so long without giving up?" I smiled, not because it was easy to answer, but because I finally could. Silence isn't weakness, I told them. Sometimes it's a weapon waiting to aim correctly. There was no applause, just a long, quiet nodding in the room. That was enough. The next morning, I sat in my favorite corner of a small bookstore downtown. Laptop open, coffee lukewarm. I added the last paragraph to a document I'd been writing on and off for years, a personal account of everything I never got to say aloud. I typed the final sentence. Not vindictive, just complete. Then I clicked Save and closed the lid. I didn't need an audience. I just needed the ending. That afternoon, a package arrived at my front door. No return label, brown craft paper, a single strip of tape. Inside, a handwritten note on thick cardstock and a thumb drive taped to the back. I saw everything. I kept copies, just in case you ever needed them. No signature, but I knew exactly who it came from, Delphine's former assistant, the one who always offered me a glass of water and a tired smile in meetings. I leaned back in my chair, holding the card gently between my fingers. Some stories finish after the ending. Some truths arrive after the reckoning. I placed the envelope down beside the notebook, its weight still humming beneath my fingertips. For a long time, I just sat there in the silence, the kind that didn't feel lonely, just steady. After everything, it wasn't anger that lingered. It was clarity. I knew exactly what needed to come next. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a dusty storefront tucked between a bakery and a laundromat on Cannon Street. I held the keys like they were more than metal, like they were witness. I turned the lock, stepped inside, and inhaled the scent of paint and fresh possibility. The floors were warm oak, the walls a muted terracotta. Bookshelves hugged the corners, lined with cookbooks, community bulletins, half-finished journals waiting to be filled. In the center, a long wooden table, refinished by a retired neighbor who used to be a carpenter. No velvet ropes, no assigned seating. A hand-painted sign hung in the front window. The Table Project. I never needed to be seated at their table. I just needed to build one they could never take away. Our first gathering was small, 6 women, 2 teens, and 1 retired nurse who used to run a quilting circle. We didn't start with lectures. We passed around mugs of tea. Someone brought lemon bars. Conversations started slowly: weather, traffic, rent. But by the time we circled back to why we're here, it was raw and wide open. A high school senior with braids tucked behind her ears asked, "What if they never say sorry?" I didn't have to pause. "Then you forgive for yourself," I said, "but remember for those who come after you." There was a kind of stillness after that, like air adjusting itself around truth. A week later, a journalist from the local paper came by. They ran a story titled, "Former Whistleblower Creates Space for Silenced Voices." It made the front page of the community section. They spelled my name right this time. I didn't correct the headline, I reclaimed it. Legacy isn't what they leave you, it's what you leave standing after they're done rewriting. The next day, I found an envelope in the mail with my mother's handwriting on the front. Inside was a single line on a folded card. I saw the article, "I hope you find what you're looking for." I didn't read the rest. I placed the card in a drawer that also held expired coupons, a necklace from my first job, and a photo booth strip of me and Jessa from college. Some things didn't need closure, just a resting place. Forgiveness isn't always letting them back in. Sometimes it's just closing the door without slamming it. In the back room of the Table Project, I placed a single printed copy of my memoir on a shelf, the table I wasn't invited to. I wasn't submitting it anywhere. I wasn't looking for a review or an award. But I knew one day, someone would pull it down and read a chapter. Maybe that girl who asked about apologies. And maybe, just maybe, she'd feel a little less invisible. "If even one girl reads this and feels seen," I whispered, "then it was worth every silence." Before locking up for the night, I added 1 more chair at the main table. It wasn't for a guest, not even for me. It was for every story that hadn't been told yet. This time, no one gets left out. And with that, I turned off the lights.